to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farrow.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
A very good afternoon, everybody. You join me, Patrick Christys, on GB News Live, and it's official. We have a new Prime Minister. Here comes the Sunak. He met King Charles earlier in the same room that the King met Truss in. At least you kept the seat warm. It's Cabinet Watch time right here, people. Who are the runners and the riders? Who's in? Who's out? Well, I'll tell you. Mogg, out. Lewis, out. Malthouse, out. Tory Chairman Jack Berry, out. Chief Whip, out. Welsh Sec, out. Environment Sec, out. Good grief. There is a major reshuffle underway and we will be bringing it to you live right here. But has Sunak got a massive mandate? Do you want a general election? Part of me thinks yes, part of me thinks no. I've softened it a bit since yesterday. Talk to me, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Can you help me make my mind up on that? I'll be talking to Tory party members who feel betrayed and let down. Also, much is being made of the fact that we have the first British Prime Minister who is not white. All right, listen to me now. Don't throw things at your TV screen, OK? Because we're going to do it a little bit differently. I love the lefty tears as they queue up to tell us that Rishi Sunak isn't the right kind of ethnic minority. Are these miserable lefties denying this country our Obama moment? Plus, we now all have to remortgage our houses and take out a loan if we want to buy some pasta and a loaf of bread. They've started putting security tags on butter, for goodness sake. Forget, I can't believe it's not butter. How about I can't believe the price of butter? What's our new PM going to do about that? Just a reminder, it's a Cabinet Watch special right here on GB News Live. When the big breaking news happens, it happens right here with me, Patrick Christys. I've got happy MPs, I've got angry Tory members, I've got fiery debates and controversial guests, but most importantly, I've got you, the people. gbviews at gbnews.uk. I don't know whether or not we should have an election. Convince me one way or the other, but before that, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 3. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has vowed to fix what he called the mistakes of Liz Truss's leadership. Addressing the country outside Downing Street for the first time in his new role, he said the nation should be braced for difficult decisions ahead. Earlier, King Charles invited Mr Sunak to form a new government, confirming him as Prime Minister. Speaking outside Number 10, Rishi Sunak pledged to place economic stability at the heart of his government.
I want to pay tribute to my predecessor, Liz Truss. She was not wrong to want to improve growth in this country. It is a noble aim. And I admired her restlessness to create change. But some mistakes were made. Not born of ill will or bad intentions. Quite the opposite, in fact. But mistakes nonetheless. And I have been elected as leader of my party and your Prime Minister, in part, to fix them.
Well, Rishi Sunak is in the process of carrying out a cabinet reshuffle. Many departures have already taken place, including the Business Secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg, along with multiple other cabinet ministers. Meanwhile, current Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is widely expected to remain in his role. World leaders have congratulated Rishi Sunak on becoming the UK's new Prime Minister. US President Joe Biden says he's looking forward to enhancing cooperation on issues critical to global security. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's ready to strengthen the partnership between the two countries. Meanwhile, Russia says it doesn't expect relations between Britain and the Kremlin to improve. Earlier, Liz Truss bid farewell to Number 10, saying brighter days lie ahead, as she urged the incoming Prime Minister to be bold. In her final speech from Downing Street, she praised her government, adding they had acted urgently and decisively as she spoke of cutting taxes.
It has been a huge honour to be Prime Minister of this great country. In particular, to lead the nation in mourning the death of Her late Majesty the Queen after 70 years of service, and welcoming the accession of His Majesty King Charles III. In just a short period, this government has acted urgently and decisively on the side of hard-working families and businesses. We reversed the national insurance increase. We helped millions of households with their energy bills and helped thousands of businesses avoid bankruptcy.
To other news now, new figures show the price of low-cost everyday grocery items like pasta, tea and cooking oil have soared. The Office for National Statistics says budget items have increased in cost by around 17% over the last 12 months. It comes as inflation is at a 40-year high, with prices up 10.1% in a year. Food prices drove the latest rise in living costs in September, along with energy bills and transport costs. A human rights activist has been released after being detained by police in Qatar for staging the first ever public LGBT+ protest in a Gulf state. A video appeared to show Peter Tatchell being approached by a police officer outside the National Museum in Doha. This comes just 26 days before the Football World Cup is due to take place in the country. A Russian court has rejected an appeal by American basketball player Brittany Griner against her 9-year prison sentence. The two-time Olympic gold medalist was arrested at Moscow airport in February for the possession and smuggling of drugs. She was found with vape cartridges containing cannabis oil in her suitcase, which is banned in Russia. A US diplomat has criticised the court's ruling, calling it excessive and disproportionate. Royal Mail workers are striking today in a long-running dispute over pay and conditions. The 24-hour walkout is the latest in a series of industrial action taken by members of the Communication Workers Union. It says its Royal Mail members have had an unagreed 2% pay deal imposed on them at a time when inflation is in double figures. An investigation is underway after 2 men have been killed in a shooting in London. Officers were called to Henley Road in Ilford in the early hours of this morning, following reports of a fight and shots being fired. They found 3 men with gunshot injuries. A man in his 20s was pronounced dead at the scene, while another died a short time later. The third victim remains in a critical condition in hospital. No arrests have been made. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now it's back to Patrick.
Britain has a new Prime Minister. No, this isn't deja vu. Here comes the Sunak. The Sunak has risen. He rished off to Buckingham Palace to meet King Charles, and now he's in a rish to appoint his new cabinet. I'll stop there, don't worry. We're on Cabinet Watch right here on GB News Live. Blink and you'll miss it today, people. We'll be live on Downing Street and in Westminster because it's going to be non-stop breaking news as we tell you who's in and who's out. Here's the latest. Mogg out, Lewis out, Tory Chairman Berry out, Welsh Sec out, DWP out, Environment Sec out. There's probably been a couple more in the last 30 seconds. We're going to learn a heck of a lot about who Rishi Sunak really is, what his politics really are in the coming moments. Would you bring Braverman back? Will Gove return? We've got issues in the Channel. We've got issues in Tesco's, Aldi and Lidl as the price of pasta goes through the roof. Rishi Sunak's speech yesterday looked like a hostage video. Today, he looks slightly less wooden, but there was a rather prolonged and awkward wave. Yeah, there he is outside, number 10. By the way, this went on for 57 seconds. Which we're going to end now for the sake of all of our sanity. Rumour has it, though, he's back at it again and he may well still be there. Here's what he actually had to say, though, about tough times ahead.
I will unite our country not with words, but with action. I will work day in and day out to deliver for you. This government will have integrity, professionalism, and accountability at every level. Trust is earned, and I will earn yours.
OK, lots of noises about the fact that he didn't bang on enough about immigration, both legal and illegal. We'll be talking about that throughout the course of the show. What did you make of that speech? I am asking as well, do you think it's time for a general election? I was quite dead set on one yesterday, then I paused, collected my thoughts and thought, hang on a minute, maybe give him a little bit more time. Where are you? This is an open forum, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I'm on the fence now as to whether or not I think we should have a general election sharpish. I want to know your cases for it and against it. The inbox has already lit up and it is fair to say a range of views. Let's cross live now to Downing Street to speak to GB News' political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Darren, good grief, what's the latest? Who's in, who's out, what's going on?
Well, Patrick, I am literally on Cabinet Watch. If you see me go this way or that way, it's because we are expecting ministers, new Cabinet ministers, some old Cabinet ministers to appear anytime soon. Rishi Sunak, having sacked a hell of a lot of people in Parliament, is now back in Downing Street preparing to appoint his new Cabinet. We've had one notification from Downing Street in the last 30 minutes or so, and that is that Alok Sharma is going to remain as the president of COP26. He's only got a couple of more weeks to go, but he's not going to be in the cabinet anymore. I think what is interesting, first of all, is if you look through those names of those that have been sacked, some of them are Boris supporters, like Jake Berry, or who are leaving government voluntarily. You never know with these things. Jacob Rees-Mogg, clearly, and Kit Malthouse. Some of them are devotees of Liz Truss, like Simon Clarke. Others, some were caught in the middle, like Brandon Lewis. Interesting, though, the people who have not been sacked or publicly acknowledged that they're going and could well be in Rishi Sunak's new government. They include people like Nadhim Zahawi, who clearly at the weekend backed Boris Johnson. Someone like James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, who is a big supporter of Boris Johnson. Therese Coffey, the Deputy Prime Minister up until this morning, and the Health Secretary. She also doesn't seem to be fired. So there seems to be jobs for people fundamentally who either backed Liz Truss or backed Boris Johnson. This is all part of Rishi Sunak's effort to try and reflect the different factions of the Conservative Party, but he is also going to reward, I suspect, some of the loyalists who've been with him over the last couple of months during campaigns. They include people like Dominic Raab, the former Deputy Prime Minister, Foreign Secretary and Justice Secretary. I suspect he might be the new Justice Secretary. We're also going to probably see Oliver Dowden maybe back in the Cabinet as well, former Culture Secretary. Will Suella Braverman be back as Home Secretary? That's a real possibility after she came out and backed Rishi Sunak over the weekend. Kemi Badenoch, there's no longer an Education Secretary. Could she move from trade to education? That remains a possibility. And then what to do with Jeremy Hunt, the current Chancellor? I suspect he may remain in post. Grant Shapps as Home Secretary, will he stay? Will he shift along somewhere? I mean, can we really have 3 Home Secretaries in the space of 8 or 9 days? Anything can happen in the political arena we find ourselves in. So we watch and we wait for emails from inside Number 10, but more importantly, for the ministers as they walk through that famous black door to find out what job they've been offered. As you say, you will not miss any of it over the next couple of hours.
Absolutely. Darren McCaffrey, thank you very, very much. Our political editor, very much on Cabinet Watch for us. And that's the theme of this show today, ladies and gentlemen, as the sackings or resignations continue and new people emerge for Rishi Sunak's new Cabinet. Joining me now is Conservative MP for Sevenoaks, Laura Trott. Laura, thank you very much. Has your phone rung yet?
No, it has not.
Will you back Rishi Sunak in both leadership contests? Would you turn down a Cabinet role?
Look, I think, speculation about it's very kind of you to ask, but this is a decision for the Prime Minister.
OK, all right. Now, Rishi Sunak did deliver his speech from a rather small plinth, it must be said, outside Downing Street. What did you make of that? Some people saying, OK, he needs to be given a bit of time. Some people, crucially, certainly in our inbox, wanted a bit more of a say when it came to immigration being a key issue. Your views on his speech outside Downing Street?
Well, I think it was a very important and serious speech, which reflects the very difficult economic and political situation that we are in. You know, he does not pretend that this is going to be easy. There are going to be very difficult decisions, but he's going to protect the most vulnerable, as he has done throughout his whole political career, and he's going to be focused on the 2019 manifesto, which is something that every single Conservative MP in Parliament was elected on. And to your point about immigration there, you know that was a central part of our manifesto, controlling immigration, and that is what every single Conservative MP is signed up to.
Indeed. Has he got a tricky time, though? Because the idea that the Conservative Party, and indeed Rishi Sunak, has a mandate, because, let's be honest with you, Boris Johnson's manifesto won in big numbers at the last general election. That only sticks if Rishi Sunak himself sticks to that manifesto. So are we looking at a Prime Minister here who's already tied his own hands?
No, I think the manifesto was something that we all signed up to. It belongs to all of us, and it is also it's for all of us to take it forward. And I think it's very important for us as a party to recognise that our mandate does stem from the 2019 manifesto. That's why it was so important that on the steps of Downing Street today, the Prime Minister reaffirmed that that was what he was signed up to. And to your point about mandate, that is where this comes from.
OK, Jacob Rees-Mogg has been biffed. He's made a powerful enemy already, hasn't he, Rishi?
Well, I think what has been notable throughout this is the calls for unity, both stemming from the Prime Minister, but also from every individual on Twitter and every piece of communication. Jacob Rees-Mogg is a dedicated public servant, and I think that it was notable in his tweet that I believe he put out, the call for unity.
Yes, OK, so just to recap for some of our viewers as well, Brexit and listeners as well, of course, we're multi-platform here at GB News. Rishi Sunak is, of course, a Brexiteer. He's vowed to stick to his guns, promised to scrap or reform all EU law or bureaucracy. Crime as well, he wants to have mandatory sentences for repeat offenders, and he's vowed to stick to his guns when it comes to standing up to Nicola Sturgeon. But he's got another big problem on his hands, hasn't he? And that is going to be standing up to the militant unions. Do you think he's got the bottle for that?
I think that it was clear, going back to the 2019 manifesto again, that we stood on a clear platform that we need to make sure that essential public services are able to continue. So this, as with so many other things, I think that what he will do is put a government in place that can drive forward key Conservative priorities. So I absolutely think that he'd be the right person to provide the leadership through that and many other things.
What do you make of the fact that he snubbed Matt Hancock yesterday?
I honestly, I didn't really see that, I'm afraid.
No, that's all right. I mean, it was fantastic television, actually, for a little while there. But you presumably know Rishi Sunak. He says that we've got tough times ahead. It's a different prime ministerial style from both Liz Truss's and Boris Johnson's, and that's absolutely fair enough. In his first two speeches, though, the overbearing criticism of Rishi Sunak has just been his delivery and the fact that maybe he's a little bit wooden. Do you think he's better behind the scenes? You know him better than I do, because he's going to have to inspire the nation if we're facing a cost of living crisis.
I wouldn't agree with that, but what I would say is that this is a man that is focused on delivery, with a proven track record of someone who can lead the country through very serious problems. And that, more than anything else, is what I want in a Prime Minister, and that is what I think we have in Rishi Sunak.
All right, Laura, look, just quickly, lastly, Laura, and you are, of course, the Conservative MP for Sevenoaks. I'm going to be talking a bit later on to some Conservative Party members. It is a mixed bag in my inbox right here in front of me. Increasingly today, people saying they don't really want a general election. I think that's more out of fear of a potential Labour government than it is necessarily a vote of confidence yet, anyway, in Rishi Sunak. But a lot of Tory party members are concerned that they haven't had a chance to vote for Rishi Sunak. In fact, well, they did, and they chose not to elect him as the leader. Is it going to be a tough sell on the doorstep? Because it is starting to look a little bit undemocratic.
Well, Well, I think firstly, in terms of just speaking from my own association, my chair did a poll of members, and between Boris and Penny and Rishi, and it came out over 50% in favour of Rishi Sunak. Now that's just where I am, but I think more than that, to your kind of broader point, I think what the Prime Minister said on the steps of Downing Street today is absolutely right. We can't just expect trust; we have to earn trust, and I think that is what every single one of us has to do every day from here on until whenever the next general election is.
Lovely stuff. Thank you very much. Laura Trott, their Conservative MP for Seven Oaks, just whizzing you through what is going to be a busy show, people, because it's Cabinet Watch time. That's right. There's runners, there's riders. It's like the 320 at Cheltenham today. Who's in and who is out? Some notable people, of course, have been biffed. Notably, Jacob Rees-Mogg, although, of course, he resigned. Yeah, OK. And, of course, Jake Berry as well, the Conservative Party chairman. We're witnessing a reshaping and a restructuring before our very eyes today of the Conservative Party, and going to get to know Rishi Sunak a little bit better, a man who has only trodden the corridors of power in Westminster for 6 years. Some would say he's pretty green in that regard, and so we are getting to know him by who he's appointing, and it will be fascinating to watch unfold live here on GB News Live. And who better to pick our way through it with than GB News' political reporter Olivia Whately, who is joining me rather helpfully in the studio right now. OK, Olivia, who are the latest names that could be coming in or moved around? I'm sick of hearing who's gone.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's been a bloodbath. He's cleared out a lot of space to get whoever he wants in. The question is, who is he going to want? Of course, there are the Sunak loyalites, like Oliver Dowden, former DCMS Secretary of State, Dominic Raab, of course, a big-hitting name who will surely be expecting a new position. Mel Stride, the former Chief Whip. Of course, the problem there, I mean, not that, you may not care, listeners may not care, viewers may not care particularly about optics, but there'll be lots of people in the Commons who will be worried about sort of seeing a cabinet full of white men. So he'll have to sort of try and work out how to square that circle. But basically, the next few hours is all going to be about trying to square various circles. There are so many things he's got to balance. He will want to reward his loyal supporters, because remember, they haven't just been loyal to him this time round, they were loyal to him last time round as well. But that comes at the expense of party unity. And of course, he won't want to make the same mistake as Liz Truss and have sort of people who think exactly the same as him all around him, and getting to a sort of groupthink echo chamber.
What I think is absolutely fascinating is why there isn't more of a conversation about bringing back Braverman. I mean, Grant Shapps has only been in there 2 minutes. He probably doesn't even know where the loos are in the Home Office at the moment. Braverman, it would appear, on paper, shares exactly the same vision for the Channel and our border security as Rishi Sunak. She is, of course, also this horrible phrase that is now doing the rounds, she's also an ethnic minority, and so therefore you would have an ethnic minority Prime Minister and an ethnic minority Home Secretary wanting to enact strong border controls, and frankly that would put Labour back in their box, wouldn't it?
Well, I have heard rumours that she might be going back to the Home Office. I think what's quite difficult for Rishi Sunak is, as well as all of those other things we've discussed, all those circles he has to square, he's got to bear in mind that the new Liz Truss cabinet have only just got their feet under the table. And if he's talking about stability, then it's quite tricky kicking all of them out, which even with quite a problem with Grant Shapps in particular. He's only been in the role a week or so, and he's been perfectly loyal to Rishi Sunak over the years. So there's no particular reason to get rid of him, although he probably wouldn't have been Rishi Sunak's first choice as Home Secretary. I think perhaps there's so much speculation now, but I think there's perhaps an opportunity to move him across to business. I've heard that being mentioned, and then bring back Suella Braverman as Home Secretary, because, as you say, that would be a strong message to the right of the Conservative Party that Rishi Sunak, the new Prime Minister, who tends to be liked rather more on the left of the party, is serious about stopping the small boats and generally getting a cap on immigration numbers.
Yeah, lots to pick through here. Thank you very much, Olivia Whately, there, our political reporter. It's Cabinet Watch, ladies and gentlemen. We've had some notable exceptions of people who are out. I want to know who's coming in, and we're going to be bringing that to you live here in the coming hours. So blink and you'll miss it, all right? But it's not the only story in town, because coming up, the cost of basic food like bread and pasta is going through the roof. Inflation is biting. Can our new Prime Minister sort that out? Are you feeling the pinch? I mean, I went into Aldi the other day, man of the people, and they had a security tag on butter, for goodness sake. I mean, it's ridiculous where we are at the minute. Is he, as a former Chancellor, the shape of Rishi Sunak, partly to blame for our economic crisis? And this is a point I want to hammer home. Do you actually blame Dishy Rishi for the economic mess that we're in right now? That is all after this very short break.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You are with me, Patrick Christys, on your TV, online and DAB radio. Now, one of the top issues on the new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's agenda will be dealing with the ongoing cost of living crisis. And a question that I'm asking you all is whether or not you think he's to blame for it, frankly, given his role as Chancellor during the pandemic. But as of September, 45% of adults who paid energy bills were finding it very or somewhat difficult to afford them, up 5% from June. That's according to fresh data from the Office for National Statistics, which is very difficult to say. The price of food staples are also soaring, so the lowest priced items have increased in cost by around 17% over the 12 months to September. So, what can Rishi do to solve this crisis? Joining me now is co-founder of Regionally Justin Urquhart Stewart to discuss this. Can I just ground ourselves a little bit in the past, if that's OK, and ask how much is Rishi Sunak, as the Chancellor during the days of furlough and Eat Out to Help Out and all of those schemes, how much is he to blame for our current economic mess?
Well, is it an individual or is it collective responsibility?
Well, these days it's an individual, isn't it?
Well, yes, he's going to be pinned down because his name's at the bottom of it, for most of it. No, a good proportion of this is global. And those people are saying it is international. There are international effects. We know whether it's the war in Ukraine impacting on commodities, slow down prices in China, slowing growth there, so we've seen inflation coming through. However, that aside, we're all suffering that. Britain's got its own particular issues, particularly related to what happens with Brexit. Now, it has actually, as people were talking about before, actually will be taking money out of the economy. It was actually, in effect, making us poorer. But On the other hand, some of the policies that he was actually putting forward have actually made life more difficult. We've been seeing very little growth, so you may not necessarily like what our very temporary Prime Minister before was going on about saying growth, 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 at a time when the rest of the world wasn't. It's very difficult indeed to try and spark that.
Justin, can I just interject on that particular point? Because that's something that we've been talking about a lot here on GB News, and I know that our viewers and our listeners care deeply about. All right, Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng's communications was absolutely nil. It was a radical budget, mini-budget, with no explanation given to it whatsoever. And the comms were bad, and that's what did for them. But the reality is it's played into people's hands, Justin, who go, hang on a minute, the grey men in suits have now taken back control. The World Economic Forum have got their man. It's the status quo all over again. And what that means is no growth, and we're all skint.
Well, the answer is there can be growth if we focus on those areas where you're going to take on the best parts of developing it. Now, if we look at old-fashioned manufacturing, you're right, we're not going to see much growth there. Germany's focused a lot on manufacturing excellent cars, but the future economy is not going to be based on that. No, the future of the economy for someone like Britain focus on our good bits, technology, where we're really good indeed, setting up smaller companies and growing those. Those are companies which we know are in demand for the rest of the world, because the rest of the world comes in and buys them off us and takes all the intellectual property and the knowledge. Wealth, it may go to Europe, goes to America. We're very bad at not just starting companies, we're good at that, growing companies. And that's what he could be focused on. And I'm afraid the politicians over the past 10 years haven't really done that. They haven't really focused on the areas which need to grow and develop, and quite happy just have a free market where you develop a company, someone goes and buys it, off it goes, keep the money.
There are serious concerns, Justin. There are serious concerns amongst many, many people that Rishi Sunak is not maybe nationalist enough when it comes to the economy. This guy wants some kind of international digital currency or whatever, right? Actually, is it time that he got off his Goldman Sachs high horse and started focusing on what is best for Britain? Is that unfair?
Well, it is in terms of actually, is he going to play to the local banking community, which is we've seen with a lot of these people coming out of the city, including me, who have seemed to have sort of follow a strange path the whole way, which is almost, it really says, just sort of status quo. Some of the investment banks are very dynamic in what they do, but it's hardly new. Whereas actually what you do need to have is some freer thinking, saying, right, where do we get more capital from? There is no shortage of money in this economy. It's a matter of directing it towards those growth areas. And unfortunately, if you come from a large background in investment banking, that doesn't actually teach you much about how to run a business day to day. The smaller businesses, and the smaller businesses in Britain, as you know, are the largest employers. So, it's all very well saying, I've got a city background, but have you actually had your hands in the dirt, actually just running small businesses, getting them going and fighting, at the moment now, really bad issues with regard to energy and commodity prices? They're the ones who are going to be the weakest ones, and that's where our growth should be.
OK, all right, good stuff. Justin, thank you very much. Justin Urquhart-Stewart, their co-founder of Regionally. We are going to be discussing a bit later on as well numerous different aspects to this cost of living crisis. Have you been feeling the pinch? I mean, the price of pasta and bread and butter and goodness knows what else has been going through the roof. Some basics up 17% in not a long period of time. After the break, I'm asking, should there be a general election? I'm asking you as well if you can convince me one way or the other. gbviews@gbnews.uk. I want to know from you what you think about that and the reasons why or why not. Because if the reason why not is that you just don't want a Labour government, is that good enough? I suspect it might be. Well, there we go. That's going to be our major talking point when we come back. We're going to have a fiery debate on that with two rather controversial guests. Don't go anywhere. See you latest headlines now, though.
Hello, good afternoon. It's 3:33. I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak has vowed to fix what he called the mistakes of Liz Truss's leadership. Addressing the country outside Downing Street for the first time in his new role, he said the nation should be braced for difficult decisions ahead. Earlier, King Charles invited Mr Sunak to form a new government, confirming him as Prime Minister. Speaking outside Number 10, Rishi Sunak pledged to place economic stability at the heart of his government.
I want to pay tribute to my predecessor, Liz Truss. She was not wrong to want to improve growth in this country. It is a noble aim. And I admired her restlessness to create change. But some mistakes were made. Not born of ill will or bad intentions. Quite the opposite, in fact. But mistakes nonetheless. And I have been elected as leader of my party and your Prime Minister, in part, to fix them.
Well, Rishi Sunak is now starting to shape his new government. Some departures have already been confirmed, including the Business Secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg, along with multiple other cabinet ministers. Meanwhile, current Chancellor Jeremy Hunt is widely expected to remain in his role. In other news, a human rights activist has been released by police in Qatar after staging the first ever public LGBT+ protest in a Gulf state. A video appeared to show Peter Tatchell being approached by a police officer outside the National Museum in Doha. The Qatar government deny an arrest was made. It comes less than a month before the Football World Cup is due to take place in the country. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be back in just a moment. Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. A pound will buy you $1.145 and €1.1522. The price of gold is £1,444.90 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,000 points.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back, everybody. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News, TV, online and DAB radio. It's Cabinet Watch time, ladies and gentlemen, so we're going to be giving you the runners and the riders throughout the course of this show. Notable names out at the moment, including the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg and, of course, the Tory party chairman, Jake Berry. Will be letting you know, hopefully, in a matter of moments, who's in. Will Braverman be back? Will Gove make a stunning return? We are continuing to cover Rishi Sunak's appointment and, indeed, his further appointments throughout the course of this show. But we're nothing without you, the people, and that's why I want to do this as well. Let's cross live now to our South East England reporter, Ellie Costello. She is at the Conservative Club there in that particular area, speaking to the members. And the members have faced a very, very contentious issue, Ellie, haven't they? Because they didn't actually really get to vote on Sunak. You've been chatting away to them. What are they saying?
Well, good afternoon to you, Patrick. Yes, we're here at Hornchurch Conservative Club right now. This is a true blue seat, 33,000.
Oh, Ellie, I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry, Ellie. One second. We've got cabinet arrivals. That is Dominic Raab, who's just made his way to 10 Downing Street. Ellie, I'm so sorry. It's the timing of this is appalling, but Dominic Raab has just walked into 10 Downing Street. Ellie, sorry about that. Carry on, please.
We've just had the news there that Dominic Raab has just walked into number 10. That's breaking news that's just happened whilst we're on air now. So we'll get some reaction to that in a minute. Looks as though he could be in the cabinet. So get thinking about what you think about that. But what I was saying was we're in Hornchurch Conservative Club right now. They've got a 33,000 majority here for the Tories. It's a blue seat. They voted Brexit and they've got a lot of opinions about what we've seen today, about Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister and also the upheaval we've seen this afternoon. 11 ministers out. What are our thoughts on that? Let's start with you. We're joined here on the left with Bob Perry. He's the former chairman of Hornchurch and Upminster constituency, and he's also a former Conservative Chancellor. And on my right here is Len Hayhoe, great name, chairman of Hornchurch Conservative Club. So you're the boss of where we are right now. But Bob, let's start with you then. So those 11 resignations, I won't run you through the whole list, but we're very interested in some of the names, aren't we? Jacob Rees-Mogg and Brandon Lewis, they're both resigned. But also Kit Malthouse, you were surprised by, weren't you?
I was surprised with Kit Malthouse, but Kit Malthouse is a friend of Boris, and they've always got on very well. But Jacob Rees-Mogg resigning, I'm not surprised about at all.
Right, OK. What about you? The names
not
out.
surprised at any of them because they're all supporters of Boris Johnson. They were supporting him for the leadership race until the weekend, so no surprises at all.
So we haven't got any appointments just yet, but we have heard about Dominic Raab heading into number 10. What are our thoughts on him? What position could he be offered, do you think?
Oh, that's a difficult one.
Put you on the spot.
I think he possibly could be either Home Secretary or Foreign Secretary.
Okay.
But I think Penny Mordaunt could be brought in as possible Home Secretary.
But you don't want to see that, do you?
I'd rather not see.
Why?
Because I don't think she's got the experience.
Do you reckon there was a plan between Rishi Sunak and Penny Mordaunt that, you know, if she bowed out gracefully, perhaps she'd have a nice cabinet position?
I can't say that for sure, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Something that might have happened. Who would you like to see in cabinet then?
I'd like to see Sajid Javid brought back as Chancellor. I think he did a brilliant job in the past. I'd love to see him back there. I'd like to see Penny Mordaunt back in the cabinet, be it as Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary. I have no particular wish either way. And I'd like to see, be interested to see what Dominic Raab's going to do. Interesting, but I'd like to see him there.
Yeah, OK, well, it looks as though he might be, so we'll keep you posted.
I'm pleased about that. Yeah.
So let's talk about the man of the moment, shall we? Rishi Sunak. Lots of talk about his wealth, lots of talk about his race. How important is it, if it's important at all, that he's the first British Asian Prime Minister? He's double the wealth of the British royal family. Let's start with you, Len.
I think it's fantastic. It just goes to show that for people in the country of different race, if you work hard, if you work to get a good education, you can achieve anything. You can achieve the top job in this country, which Prime Minister is. So I think it's fantastic, especially for the youngsters going through school at the moment. Education is extremely important. That's why I'd like to see a good education secretary. Let's get through to people, work hard, study. You can achieve what you want. You can achieve your dreams, and that's important.
Well, that is true Conservative values, isn't it? Although some would say he has an awful lot of privilege as well. Bob, what do you make of that? The British Asian Prime Minister, I mean, how important?
Personally, that's not important to me. I think the man should be judged on who he is and not by the colour of his skin.
And you know him personally, don't you?
I do
You've
know
met him several times.
Yes. Well, met him twice, actually. But yes, so the colour of his skin is unimportant to me. And the fact that he is a wealthy man, a wealthy individual, again, is something that I think gives him good experience because of his experience in banking and as a previous Chancellor. I think that he's going to do the right things.
Well, fingers crossed. The country certainly needs some stability right now. We need to hand back, so we're on Cabinet Watch. But very briefly, was it right that we didn't have a general election? Was it right that we went with Rishi Sunak for the MPs vote?
Yes, I believe it was. The Conservative Party were given the mandate. We don't elect a Prime Minister, we elect a party. I think it's right. We need stability, and a general election now doesn't give us that. I think it's right we didn't have the election.
And that's from a Conservative Party member who wasn't actually allowed to vote, and you don't think that's a bad thing. And Bob, very briefly, is it right that we didn't have a general election?
I think it's right we didn't have a general election, but my issue with Rishi being Prime Minister, I think he'll do a good job, but I don't like the fact that he was appointed rather than elected.
You think it should have gone to the members?
It should have gone to the membership, and certainly the MPs. I mean, what all the MPs did was put him forward. They didn't choose him.
Yeah. Well, this is the great thing about GB News. Look, differing opinions, but respectful conversation. Thank you so much to Bob and Len for joining me this afternoon. Really, really good to be with you. And Patrick, we'll get back to you now and Cabinet Watch.
Absolutely. Ellie Costello, fantastic stuff. Great to have that input. Holding court there at a Conservative club. You love to see it. Right now, Rishi Sunak has been appointed Prime Minister by His Majesty King Charles, apparently in the same room that Liz Truss departed from, so at least the seat was warm. But there's questions, serious questions, over whether he has a proper mandate to govern. After all, it was Boris Johnson who secured the Tories their House of Commons majority in the 2019 general election as leader. Clearly, all of the Conservative MPs who speak to me have been sent the same email saying, push the fact that we live in a parliamentary democracy. We live in a parliamentary democracy, and they voted for the manifesto, not the man, which is actually not really what a lot of Red Wall MPs were saying to me at the time of that general election. Rishi Sunak didn't have to face a vote of Tory party members either to become leader. So should he go to the public at a general election to get that mandate to govern, or would a fresh vote just cause more instability? Loads of you have been getting in touch on this. It's the big question of the day. GBviews at gbnews.uk. I've softened my approach somewhat on this. I was bang in favour of a general election yesterday. I'm on the fence today, and I want to hear from you. Joining me to discuss this right now is Sunil Sharma, Chair of Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth, who doesn't believe that now is the time for a general election, and journalist and political commentator and fan favourite Matthew Stadlen, who thinks now is the time for one. I'll start with you, Sunil, because as far as I can see, the best argument against a general election right now is the fact that Labour might win it.
No, I think it's more of course, the instability that it would cause, for sure. I think the bigger question is, I think there's more important thing going on right now in terms of the cost.
Just to interrupt you, sorry, quickly. Jeremy Hunt is leaving Downing Street at the minute. We've just seen images there of that famous black door opening and Jeremy Hunt leaving it. Not immediately, obvious, of course, what that means at the moment. Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, he's staying as Chancellor. I'm just hearing in my ear right now. This is what Cabinet Watch is all about, people. It's very, very live. So Jeremy Hunt is staying as your Chancellor. Fascinating stuff. Possibly a shrewd move from Rishi Sunak, because he will know more, rightly or wrongly, about the economy than Jeremy Hunt. So those days of Gordon Brown versus Tony Blair and the war between numbers 10 and 11, now basically it's all in number 10, and Jeremy Hunt is just a face in a suit, isn't he? But Sunil, I'll lob it back your way. You were just explaining to the nation why you don't think now is the time for a general election.
Yeah, the instability. You know, when we voted 2019 for in the general election, I voted for the Conservative Party. Of course, I was happy Boris Johnson was there, but I think of course, we saw some swing states, swing seats even. I just think the whole point of a democratic system, I think we forget why we have the way it's been set up, why this constitution, the way it's been written is, you have a government, they stay in charge for 5 years, they make unpopular decisions, they make popular decisions, and you make that assessment at the end of the 5 years. Okay. They have that chance to change the leader or whatever they want to do. I don't think it makes sense to call a general election because the leader has changed. I don't take the manifesto point either. All right,
we'll come back to that. Matthew Stadlen, I'll bring you in now. Matthew, I can see the side of that it's not the time for a general election, and I'm wondering whether or not the time is right for Labour to want a general election anyway, because the wind has been sucked out of their sails.
Not sure it's been sucked out of their sails. Parliamentary democracy is how we run our country. Didn't matter much to Boris Johnson when he unlawfully prorogued Parliament. Didn't matter much to Boris Johnson when, I would argue, he lied to Parliament over breaking his own COVID rules. At the very least, he misled Parliament. So at the moment, it suits Conservatives to talk about parliamentary democracy. We absolutely do vote for a party. That's how it works. We vote for our own local MPs. But if you talk to, how many was it, 13 million or so people who voted for the Tories in 2019, I would suggest to you that a substantial proportion of those voted Conservative, voted for their local Tory MP because Boris Johnson was at that point the Prime Minister and was at that point the leader of the Conservative Party. So that's one point. They certainly didn't vote for the Conservative Party with Rishi Sunak as Prime Minister, and they didn't also vote for the Conservative Party with Liz Truss as Prime Minister. The other main point is that we've now had 3 prime ministers in 2 months. Try to get your head around that. It is totally extraordinary. It's unprecedented, almost unprecedented. Liz Truss was the shortest-serving prime minister for hundreds of years. I don't see how we can have 3 prime ministers in 2 months over our heads, your heads, all of our heads, the electorate, and not go to the polls.
OK, all right, Sunil, I'll throw it back to you because, OK, maybe a general election right now, maybe a general election tomorrow isn't prudent. But what about one in 6 months?
I think you have to... The whole point you elect a leader is you give them time to govern. They need to make unpopular decisions. So once we go into this snap culture of calling elections because we don't like the manifesto has changed or something else has changed, you actually cause problems for the state of democracy, because what happens in 3 years' time? 6 years' time, wins a massive general election. We get through another pandemic or something happens, and now his manifesto that he ran his election on, that he wins in, all of a sudden changes. Should he call a general election? I don't think he should. I think he won the election and he should have the capacity to govern his country that he's had for 5 years, and then, after at the end of that point, we have that election and we fight for it, because otherwise we go through this culture of having general elections just because we're not happy, just because a party is currently in chaotic. I think it sets a dangerous precedent.
There is a pretty compelling point, Matthew, to be fair, that Rishi Sunak, what he stood on when he wanted to become Prime Minister before Truss, was actually very similar to what Boris Johnson wanted. He was talking about getting out of EU laws, etc., EU bureaucracy, as he would call it, sorting out illegal immigration as well. He updated that a bit to throw his weight behind what's going on in the Channel. Similar policies when it came to the environment, to housing, to women, believe it or not. Although, actually, I imagine personally possibly quite different policies towards women. So, actually, the mandate thing, in terms of the general election, does still stand.
This is chaos, though, isn't it? No broadcaster, you might not tell me your politics, but as a broadcaster, it's exciting times, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because this is absolute chaos. It's not exciting times for the people up and down the country who are suffering with the cost of living and who are watching...
Does that get better with an election, then, Matthew? Because it doesn't, does it? We have another, what will it be, 6 weeks?
5 weeks, 6 weeks. It depends whether you think the Tories are in any fit shape to run this country. I'll give you one quick example. Jacob Rees-Mogg, who we now believe has left government, and I think that's a very good thing. He was literally business secretary in charge of business at a moment of national crisis. On Sunday morning, he was telling us all on Twitter that, of course, Boris Johnson will stand in this race. Hours later, we were told Boris Johnson is stepping down. This is chaos at the very heart of government. And if you cannot have stability from the Tory party, then I think it's the right thing to do to throw it open, to have a reset, to give you and me and all of us a chance to have our say, because I think we're in very, very difficult and different situation from where we were in 2019.
OK, just to say the international perspective on this as well, Sunil. I mean, if we were to have a general election now and have another Prime Minister, I mean, for a start, Joe Biden would have to try and butcher another name. But on top of that, it makes us look awful. Do you think that, realistically, for the sake of Britain standing on the world stage, we need to just give Sunak a bit of time? Because he hasn't even put his cabinet together yet.
For sure. I mean, that's a good example, Joe Biden. I think there's no one can deny how bad he's doing his job right now. He deserves his 4 or 5 years. He won his election. Give him those years. You know, I would love to see him gone today. But the reality is he won that election. Going back to that mandate point about Rishi Sunak's got a similar mandate.
Rishi Sunak didn't win the election, though.
But the Conservative Party did. And that mandate, I'm going to go back to that mandate thing, because the problem with this mandate argument, even as similar or not similar, is that went out the window when COVID-19 happened. So should we have called an election then? Should we have called an election when we decided to go to war in Ukraine and Russia? Like, where does it stop? Where do we start? Why can't... I think
it's a sliding scale. I think if you have 3 prime ministers in 2 months, if you have 4 chancellors in under 4 months, if you have 3 home secretaries in 2 months, you are in uncharted waters. And I think the electorate, I don't think we will have one, but I think the electorate will not forgive this for various reasons. 1, the chaos. 2, the fact that the Tories tanked the economy. And 3, that they are now appointing, literally, that's the key word, appointing prime ministers over our head.
And if they don't accept it and they're not happy, they'll have the chance to vote in 2 years' time, because that's how democracy works.
That's 2 years too late. That's 2 years too late.
It's not a popularity contest. It's not an opinion-based. I've got my opinions, you've got opinions. I think we should protect but we should protect the Constitution. And our Constitution says we have an election every 5 years. And there's a reason why people have done that. It's not been plucked out of the sky. There's people who have literally worked their whole lives constructing this. And the reason is because you need to have people who make bad decisions, who do things in the short term.
Tories just changed their own rules. They've just changed their own rules. They've even gone over the heads of their own members.
But OK, they've changed the rules. So guess what? In 2 years' time, those members, if they're so angry, they can vote for Sir Keir Starmer. They can vote Lib Dem.
Good.
If they're so angry. But if they're not, then they can stick to the Constitution and they can vote when they have the right time.
OK, well, look, both of you, thank you very much. It spiced up a little bit at the end there. You love to see it, right? That was Matthew Stadlen, of course. He's on your screens right now, political commentator and indeed journalist, and Sunil Sharma, chair of Conservative Friends of the Commonwealth, who does not believe that there should be a general election. Where are you on that? Has that made your mind up? Help me make my mind up. gbviews@gbnews.uk. It's over to Downing Street now because this is Cabinet Watch, and Jeremy Hunt just left the door of number 10, potentially not for the reason that a lot of you might like him to. Darren McCaffrey is there he is. What's going on with Jeremy Hunt?
Well, he's remaining as Chancellor of the Exchequer. As you say, he left that black door behind me, having gone from number 11 into number 10 to be told that he's going to remain as Chancellor of the Exchequer, and he then left and walked into the Treasury building. I suspect it was all for show. But yes, it is a reconfirmation that Jeremy Hunt will remain as the Chancellor of the Exchequer, having been appointed by Liz Truss, 10 days ago, to help stabilise the markets. He has somewhat succeeded in that. He will deliver that mid-term fiscal plan, possibly as early as next Monday. Just to say that here comes Oliver Dowden up the street, who was Culture Secretary under Boris Johnson.
Shout
Are you excited about rejoining the Cabinet, Mr Dowden?
Shout again.
There we go, he's going in. He's not going to answer our questions, I can tell you. Let me bring you up to date where we are, because aside from Jeremy Hunt, which is not at all surprising, Dominic Raab has gone in. This is normally done on seniority, Patrick, so my expectation is that Dominic Raab is going to be the new Home Secretary. That means that Grant Shapps will no longer be Home Secretary. We've not seen or heard from him yet. James Cleverly, who's the current Foreign Secretary, has just gone inside number 10. My expectation is that he will remain as Foreign Secretary. He's a Boris backer, don't forget. So that means that Penny Borden, who's been much talked about, does not seem to be getting the job in the Foreign Office. And now we've had Oliver Dowden go in. So that's interesting. What job is he going to get? Maybe Education Secretary? We're not entirely sure. We'll have to wait and see. Oliver Dowden, by the way, a big supporter, one of the closest, most senior supporters of the new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak. So Jeremy Hunt is confirmed. I think my expectation is that Dominic Raab is going to become the new Home Secretary, and it looks like James Cleverly is going to remain at the Foreign Office, and that is part of Rishi Sunak's attempts to try and give key jobs to some of the key supporters in different factions across the Conservative Party.
Yes, absolutely. OK, really interesting stuff, this. It is very much live here on GB News Live. Darren McCaffrey joining us from Downing Street. Just stay there quickly for me, Darren, because we've got some runners and riders, of course, as Darren was outlining there. The anticipation might be that Dominic Raab is Home Secretary. What do you make of that at home, people? James Cleverly potentially remaining in post as Foreign Sec. Could that be a good continuity candidate for Rishi Sunak? Jeremy Hunt, the big one there, who came rather for show, I think, ceremonially, out of that door of 10 Downing Street. He's staying as your Chancellor. And on that note, Darren, I want to hear from you. Do you think the Tories are walking into something here? Because Rishi Sunak, fabulously wealthy. Personally, I couldn't give two hoots about how rich this guy is. If anything, I think it's quite a good thing. Jeremy Hunt as well, also worth somewhere in the region of around 14 million quid. Again, good. I'm in favour of wealth creation. However, if we're about to have a little bit of austerity, have they walked into an open goal here, which is you two rich city boys are now telling me that I'm skin? You know, does the argument make itself?
There is definitely a risk of that, and that is something that the Labour Party are definitely going to play on, Patrick. There is no doubt about that. Interestingly, there's one of those kind of word diagrams issued yesterday about Rishi Sunak. Now, it had some good words as far as Rishi Sunak's concerned on it. It had competent, intelligent, capable. It had some bad words like traitor, snake. But the biggest word by absolute far was rich. And that is what lots of members of the public associate with Rishi Sunak. You're right, Jeremy Hunt is also quite personally wealthy. I think the big question for them, and David Mellor touched upon this yesterday actually on GB News, is about how they handle that. Was it great that we saw Rishi Sunak on a building site, do you remember, during the summer, wearing very expensive shoes that cost hundreds of pounds? It all looked a bit odd, doesn't go very well. That's something that Labour would exploit. I think for lots of people it won't necessarily matter, but yes, when the government is making tough decisions, when there is going to be austerity, potentially 2.0, and you've got very wealthy people doing it, and they don't do it in a tactful way, yes, will their opponents and critics utilise that, and could it be politically harmful? You bet it will.
Yeah, absolutely. Darren, thank you very, very much. Darren McCaffrey joining us from the steps of Downing Street there, our political editor. I'm just going to go to a couple of the messages from the inbox now. We are the People's Channel. I want to hear from you, and I've been asking your views as we, I suppose, bring you our Cabinet Watch special here as Rishi Sunak appoints a new cabinet. It's not a reshuffle because he never had a cabinet to begin with. Lots of talk as to whether or not Jeremy Hunt is a good choice to remain as Chancellor. People don't particularly appear to like him. And yes, as well, I wanted a general election because I despise Rishi Sunak, not the words of me, the words of Alison, and the way he plotted and backstabbed to get the job. But having listened to your panel discussion, then I've changed my mind. And can I just say as well, there has been a shift. Indeed, I myself has shifted. Yesterday, I personally was bang in favour of a general election. Why? Well, because it didn't sit well with me that the idea that we had, OK, Liz Truss elected through the Tory membership, the usual channels. The way that Rishi Sunak, a man that I didn't really believe was deeply popular, I suspect, with the nation as a whole, certainly not deeply popular with the Tory membership, as was evidenced by the fact they didn't vote for him when they had the choice. I didn't like the idea there was this coronation of Rishi Sunak and there was a lot of backslapping and handshaking and waving and cheering, and it felt to me a little bit as though there'd been some kind of soft coup. Now, I do still believe that there has been a bit of a soft coup, and I think the appointment, or the continual appointment, of Jeremy Hunt as our Chancellor, I think is not particularly a good thing for our national interest. However, is now the right time to have a general election? When you look at the financial crisis that we're actually in, we wouldn't be given a choice on what to vote for anyway, because we'd have no idea what Keir Starmer stands for anything on pretty much anything. We also, as yet, don't know what Rishi Sunak, we don't even know who's in his cabinet, do we? That's why it's Cabinet Watch. So what are we actually voting? 6 more weeks of scratching our national heads while prices go up in shops and the issues on the channel keep on happening. But I want to know from you, if you are on the fence when it comes to Rishi Sunak, what could he do now that might change your mind? Some rumblings in terms of Dominic Raab potentially becoming Home Secretary. He was, of course, Foreign Secretary and indeed on a sun lounger when Kabul fell. Does that have any sway with you? We understand it that James Cleverly is potentially going to remain as Foreign Secretary. All of this remains up in the air, ladies and gentlemen. These are the rumblings that we've had so far. What do you make of that? Do you think that's a good continuity appointment? Alok Sharma, big news this, people, big news. The one you've all been waiting for is going to remain as COP26 head. Oh, good grief, that's a relief, isn't it? That's a relief. I'm glad we can get that out of the way. But would you rather have as Home Sec, for example, someone like Suella Braverman, someone who absolutely categorically was determined to send some of the boats back, pretty much, or at least put some of the people in those boats on a plane and send that plane to Rwanda? That resignation letter, when she got herself out of the hot mess that Liz Truss had created, was pretty astonishing stuff, but in line, in step, in lockstep with what I suspect a lot of you actually wanted, which is for this government finally to take immigration, both legal and illegal, seriously. So would you welcome her back? She already knows her way around the Home Office, doesn't she? Who else do you want to see? Do you want Gove brought back in? Do you want the olive branch to be extended to Boris? Could you imagine? Could you imagine if Boris Johnson made his way back into Cabinet? That's almost definitely not going to happen. We're looking now. There he is. Nadeem Zahawi's on his way in. There we are. OK, so Nadeem Zahawi, who previously was one of the shortest ever serving chancellors, I believe, is now walking in to Downing Street. What role would you like to see him get? I want to know who you want and where. Loads of you have been getting in touch. GBviews at gbnews.uk. That's it for me. This is from Bill. As a lifelong Tory voter, I say no more. Stay on holiday, Raab, while everything was going haywire in Afghanistan. Slimeball Hunt as Chancellor. It's strong stuff, Bill, and we love to see it. And as for the other slimeball shaps, there we go. Not a fan of what would appear to be Rishi Sunak's current cabinet there, Bill in Poole. We have got Leslie. Raab is a moron. That's from Leslie. He'll probably say, she says, certainly, to paraphrase Leslie, that she doesn't think he'll sort out the small boats crisis. There we go. Given the fact that what's going on in the Channel is, for my money, apart from the economy, the biggest issue facing this country, because it speaks to something larger. If we don't care about that, if we don't care about illegal immigration, the most visible form of illegal immigration that we could possibly imagine, how on earth do we expect to care about legal immigration? We can't even start to have a conversation about the issues facing this country when it comes to the sheer numbers of legal migrants. if we can't have one about illegal migration. It's worth at this point just refreshing your memories, if you need them refreshed, about what Rishi Sunak said about immigration and about what's been going on, etc., in the Channel. He did say that he wanted to put a cap on the number of refugees that Britain would accept in order to make the Rwanda plan work. He said that he would stop an illegal set of criminal gangs who are causing people to die in pursuit of coming here. That's speaking towards the people smugglers, of course. He says we have a proud history of welcoming people, but it's also vital that we are in control of who's coming here. So, who do you want to see him put in charge of that? And right on cue, we've got GB News' Home and Security Editor, Mr. Mark White, joining me now. Mark, thank you very, very much. Is Grant Shapps going to keep his job? What's going on? We're on Cabinet Watch.
Well, I think all bets are off, really. The smart money was suggesting that he may well keep his job because there have been so many Home Secretaries here in Marsham Street in recent weeks, and that there was the time was right for a bit of stability. But if you're the new Prime Minister, you want to appoint the very best people for your new government to get things done, then why shouldn't you decide, just because he's been there only a matter of some 5 days, that if you want to move a new Home Secretary in, then you're going to do that. So it may well be that Mr. Shapps, after less than a week in the job, could be on his way out of the door here at Marsham Street. We are at that phase now where we are getting the big offices of state announced. We've had, of course, that confirmation that Jeremy Hunt will stay put for very good reasons, of course, given the economic climate at the moment.
Shapps is on his way in. Mark, sorry to cut you off. Grant Shapps has just walked into Downing Street. I just wanted to bring our nation that. Mark, sorry to interrupt. Carry on, please.
Yeah, so, I mean, that may well be to reconfirm him in his post here at the Home Office, or potentially to offer him another exciting opportunity in another government department. But, of course, we've just been told that Dominic Raab has been made the Justice Secretary. That is a role that he has had before, and Deputy Prime Minister. So Dominic Raab to be Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister, taking up that role he had until fairly recently. So that would obviously now cancel out him as being a replacement for Grant Shapps here. It doesn't necessarily mean that Grant Shapps will definitely stay here, but he has made, understandably, his intentions clear that he has a big job to do here in one of the big offices of state. He wants to get to grips with the control of our borders and to start reducing again the number of people who are coming across on small boats. Key to that for the government, and Rishi Sunak has told us he is wed to this, as Liz Truss before and Boris Johnson before him, which is the Rwanda policy. They're in a court battle at the moment. Within a few weeks, we should know whether the government's policy on Rwanda is legal or not. If it is, then that can start in earnest, and perhaps that will have the kind of effect they're hoping it will have on the people trafficking model. But for the time being, Dominic Raab, who some people were beginning to tip as moving here to Marsham Street to take over at the Home Office for Grant Shapps, just in office for 5 days, that's not happening now. Dominic Raab will take over that department that he now knows so well, Justice Department, a very important department. Doesn't get the kind of profile that the Home Secretary gets, but you're in charge of the criminal justice system, the courts and the prison system. The criminal justice system, the courts, for instance, Patrick, it's fair to say that they're close to meltdown. There are delays, 400,000 court cases in England and Wales in the Crown Courts and Magistrates Court, that there is a backlog at the moment. A very important job he has to take on.
Mark, thank you very much. Great stuff, that. Mark White joining us there, our Home and Security editor, right on cue as well, because just as we had Mark White on screen, almost like we planned it, we had the announcement, if you're just joining us, that Dominic Raab potentially was tipped to take over as Home Secretary. No, he won't. He's going to be Justice Secretary. That's been announced, and as we understand it, Deputy Prime Minister. So he's back where he was, actually, in that regard. Potential, of course, for Grant Shapps to stay on as Home Secretary now. What do you make of that, people? Just quickly, some of the people, notable people who have now made their way into Downing Street are currently in Downing Street. Oliver Dowden, James Cleverly, currently Foreign Sec, expected to stay there. And Nadeem Zahawi, we'll have to wait and see what role he will have. But these are now the great offices of state that we're seeing divvied up and divided up and sliced up, OK? That's what happens first. You get your great offices of state, pretty much, and then we take it from there. So it's well worth sticking around, people, because we're going to have some big news coming your way non-stop. Right now, though, we've got Conservative MP for Faversham and Mid-Kent and former Treasury Minister Helen Whately. Thank you very, very much. Helen, great to have you on the show. I might as well, given your Treasury experience, talk to you a bit about the other big news, which is that Jeremy Hunt is staying on, it would appear, as our Chancellor. There was a bit of a collective groan in my inbox when that happened, I must say. The fact is he just going to be a bit of an empty suit? Because Rishi Sunak's in number 10 at the minute. He knows his way around the spreadsheets better than Jeremy.
Well, as you say, I've worked alongside Rishi Sunak, new Prime Minister, in the Treasury, and so I know the strength of his grip that he has on the economy. He clearly set out during the leadership campaign. Just quickly, Helen. Sorry, Helen. Sorry, Helen. Stay where you are. It's one of these days, I'm afraid. Suella Braverman is walking into number 10 Downing Street right now. I suspect, Helen, apologies, but we've been slightly overtaken by events. I'm just going to throw back to you, Helen. Do you think that Suella Braverman should potentially be just reinstated as Home Secretary? She shares, it would appear, the same vision for immigration, both legal and illegal, as Rishi Sunak claims to have. It would be the match made in heaven, wouldn't it? Well, actually, it's not my job here as a Member of Parliament to be speculating on the reshuffle. The decisions are very much for the Prime Minister. What he has said clearly, and he said to Members of Parliament yesterday, is that he wants to have a government of all the talents, and clearly he had a very strong message on the steps of number 10 earlier about unity, about bringing country, and clearly the Parliament needs to come together because we have difficult times ahead. So I'm absolutely confident that he will do that through this reshuffle. You asked me a question a moment ago about Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor, and we know that he has been very reassuring to many people across the country and to the financial markets in the last couple of weeks as Chancellor. So I'm sure that the confirmation of him in that job will go down well, and I think it is a good sign of how, as Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is prioritising their economic stability and building confidence in the UK economy.
Has your phone rung yet? Has Sunak been on?
Sorry, I
Has your phone rung yet for a cabinet appointment, potentially? Are you in the running?
No, as you can see, I'm here on the green talking to you, but I do think it's really important, as I said, to make sure that that message is understood of this is time for us to come together. And also, so to make sure that people are listening to what the Prime Minister said earlier on, what his priorities will be, and his commitment to delivering the manifesto from 2019 that we were all elected on. I know a moment ago you were talking on the show about the importance of control of our borders, which is something that Rishi Sunak previously has talked about and clearly will make a priority as Prime Minister.
Yes, indeed. Just lastly, Helen, I appreciate you taking the time to speak to us on what is a busy day here on Cabinet Watch on GB News Live, and, of course, of rolling with the punches there when Suella Braverman entered number 10. If you're just joining us again, that news, Suella Braverman is now in number 10. What could that possibly mean, ladies and gentlemen? We'll bring you the latest here. Helen, just in terms of the democratic side of this thing now, I know you mentioned the mandate, I know you mentioned the 2019 Conservative manifesto. A lot of Conservative Party members are a bit annoyed at the fact that they didn't actually get to vote for Rishi Sunak. Surely you cannot wait 2 years before you go to the public and have a general election.
Well, actually, I mean, the views of members are, of course, really important to me as a Conservative Member of Parliament. There was a process set out by the party a few days ago and agreed with the representatives of the members that has led to having just one nomination who received the 100, one person who received the 100 nominations and put himself forward to be leader. And we have seen over 200 members of Parliament backed Rishi Sunak to be Prime Minister. And so that shows that he commands the support of Parliament, which is really, really important for getting legislation through. What we have overall as a mandate, of course, is the 2019 general election result, that manifesto that all of us as Conservative MPs stood on, which he's committed to delivering.
Helen, thank you very much. That is, of course, Helen Whately there, former Treasury Minister and MP for Faversham and Mid Kent. It's a movable feast here, and we are moving with it because we've got Conservative MP for Harlow, Robert Halfon, who is here now, supported Rishi Sunak. He got his man. Just seeing Suella Braverman go into Downing Street. The office of Home Secretary is... well, it's not up for grabs because it's currently Grant Shapps, of course, but let's be honest, anything could happen. It's popped off in my inbox here. It's a job and a role and a brief that our viewers here and our listeners here care deeply about. Bring Braverman back is the overwhelming response that I've had here. Would you back that?
Well, I think both people are good MPs, Grant Shapps and Suella Braverman, and I'd be happy with either. I don't want to go around choosing Rishi's Sunak's the new Prime Minister's Home Secretary, but I think they both have got a lot to offer, whatever position they may be given. OK. Has your phone gone off yet? I haven't had much of a signal in my office, so nothing's come through yet, but I'm not waiting really because I've got a very good job as chair of the Education Select Committee, which is a brilliant job, and I can campaign and champion education, schools, colleges, skills all the time.
You'd make a cracking Education Secretary then, wouldn't you?
Well, I leave it to others to judge what job, but I'm quite happy with the job that I have, and it's a good job, so I'm not campaigning for another one. OK, all right. Now, we've seen several big names who I understand are currently in Downing Street. Those include Nadeem Zahawi. We've also got Oliver Dowden. Is he a big name? I suppose he's a bit of a big name, isn't he? James Cleverly as well. The big news has come through just in a matter of moments before was Dominic Raab is now our Justice Secretary and the Deputy Prime Minister. Again, it would appear. Dominic Raab copped it a lot for being on a sun lounger when Kabul fell. I mean, he can't go on holiday anytime soon, can he? Because we've got a record backlog when it comes to court cases, etc. Our prison system appears to be on its knees and law and order and all of that jazz. What qualifies Dominic Raab now to have such a big brief? Well, I rate Dominic Raab very highly. I think he was a reforming Justice Secretary. And if I can give you one example, I brought through an amendment in the House of Commons that would allow prisoners who were about to leave prison to start apprenticeships, something that was not allowed before. It was, in essence, Dominic Raab who made that happen. He called me. He said the government would do it. I didn't quite believe that they would, and he actually brought it through. And that will mean that prisoners who are leaving prison can start their apprenticeship before they leave and get a skill and get a good job when they come out, which is transformative in terms of their rehabilitation. So I think he is a reforming. I'm very glad he's back in justice. Actually, he's a reforming. He was a reforming Justice Secretary. I think he has some good ideas, and I look forward to see what he's got planned over the coming weeks and months.
OK, some would argue that Rishi Sunak needs to do absolutely everything he can to reconnect with the Conservative Party base, especially considering that he didn't go to the membership before. Serious questions about democracy raising their head there. That idea of a general election will be like a ball and chain for at least a little while anyway, whether or not people think we need one. Dominic Raab, you know, proper Tory, some would say, is now Justice Secretary. Suella Braverman, we've seen entering Downing Street. She appears to at least care about immigration, both legal and illegal. Rishi Sunak has said that he wants to get us out of basically every single EU law or bit of bureaucracy. Does Rishi Sunak not need to try to assemble now a proper Brexit-backing, tough on law and order, tough on illegal immigration cabinet, or the Tories are cooked?
What he needs to do is have a cabinet that represents the best talents in the Conservative Party. And I'm less interested in what their political views may or may not have been in the past. What I am interested in is, are they good at their job? Are they going to deliver for the British people? Because at the moment, the public want us to stabilise the economy. That is the number one most important thing we can do. If we stabilise the economy, we can bear down pressure on interest rates and inflation. That means cutting the cost of living. And the last few weeks have been, in essence, a tidal wave of one market disaster after another. And that is what the public are expecting us to do. And I just want the best people in the cabinet, not because somebody wrote a pamphlet about something or said something, or did this X or Y or Z weeks or months ago.
OK, Robert, final question to you, and I want to get your views on the fact that I think that the Tory party has just taken the wind out of Keir Starmer's sails. I have before me here a cup of lefty tears. Because we do have our first ethnic minority Prime Minister, Tory. We've had several women in charge, Tory. If you go back as well, first ethnic minority throughout various different high offices of state, Tory, Tory, Tory. And they are now apparently the wrong kind of ethnic minorities. You don't just have to be an ethnic minority nowadays, apparently, Robert. You also have to be poor, because we can't have someone who cares about wealth generation. I mean, maybe, just maybe, especially, good grief, can you imagine if we have a ethnic minority as a Prime Minister and Suella Braverman comes back as Home Secretary, she's also an ethnic minority, and they want to do something about immigration, both legal and illegal. I mean, I think Keir Starmer's head will explode.
Well, I think they talk the talk about inclusion, diversity. We walk the walk, and it's not about discrimination or having positive discrimination, or having targets about meritocracy. And that's what I've always believed the Conservatives are all about: opportunity and meritocracy. And I think Rishi Sunak rising to the top of the Conservative Party, I think that shows the kind of party we are. We've had the first Jewish Prime Minister, the first woman Prime Minister, now we've got the first Asian Prime Minister, and I think it's something we should be proud of. But I'm proud that he's there, not because of his ethnic background, but because I believe he'll be a good Prime Minister. He's got the experience, he's trusted on the economy, and he helped us through the difficult COVID times.
Absolutely. And Robert, I suppose, hey, if it does all go south for you in the Tory party, you could switch over to Labour, identify as a woman and get on an all-women shortlist. Robert Halfon, thank you very much, Conservative MP for Harlow. Great to have him on the show. What do you make of all of that, ladies and gentlemen? Some big news, OK, just a very quick recap. Suella Braverman currently in Downing Street. Dominic Raab is now Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister, easy for me to say. We've got Nadeem Zahawi in Downing Street. We've got Grant Shapps in Downing Street. This is going to be fascinating times. We are on Cabinet Watch, people. Oh, and Jeremy Hunt is still your Chancellor. Don't you dare move. GBViews at GBNews.uk, by the way. Make sure you get in touch. What do you make of the runners and the riders so far? What do you make of the decisions made so far? Who do you want in post? Is it time to bring back Braverman? This is GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. We've got loads coming your way on top of that, as well as inflation bites with soaring food prices. I am asking if the new Prime Minister is the man to solve our economic crisis, or whether, actually, you blame him for the economic crisis. I've got a poll on my Twitter feed at the moment, at Patrick Christys, with 73% of you saying yes, you do, in fact, blame Rishi Sunak for the current economic mess. Loads to get stuck into, so little time to do it. I'll see you in 2.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around with all the biggest topics and guests. You will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness, mate.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. Over a drink, we have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back. Patrick Christys here with GB News Live on your TV, online and DAB radio. Massive day this, people. It's Cabinet Watch, OK? Who's in, who's out? We'll be bringing you the latest on it. And in fact, I'm hearing that Simon Hart has been appointed as Chief Whip. Simon Hart has been appointed as the new Chief Whip in Rishi Sunak's cabinet, replacing Wendy Morton. So bye-bye, Wendy. See you in a bit. Simon's in town. Hart has been the MP for Carmarthen West and South Pembrokeshire since 2010, and, of course, served as the Secretary of State for Wales under Boris Johnson. Before that, he was a junior minister in the Cabinet Office. He backed Remain, for what it's worth, in the 2016 referendum. So that news again, Simon Hart has been appointed as Chief Whip. It's very, very live today, ladies and gentlemen. Suella Braverman is currently in Downing Street. That's one to watch. Of course, it is Dominic Raab, who was tipped to potentially shift over to Home Secretary, is now actually Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister. What does this mean for Grant Shapps, current Home Secretary, for whatever that's worth? James Cleverly, by the way, is expected to remain as Foreign Secretary. Jeremy Hunt is still your Chancellor and will remain as your Chancellor. Nadeem Zahawi is currently in Downing Street, as is Oliver Dowden, which paints a picture, I think, doesn't it, of potentially some deals being done. What we're witnessing right now unfolding before our very eyes are the big offices of state being divvied up. Mark White, our Home Security Editor, what on earth is going on with you, Mark? Come on, give it to us.
Confirmation now that James Cleverly will remain as Foreign Secretary. Again, there had been a lot of talk about the merits of moving him on or keeping him in place, given the international crisis that is facing the world at the moment with this war raging in Ukraine. He had said himself that this was a time for making sure that that cabinet is stuffed full of the first team, the very best for the job. In other words, appealing to the new Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, not to sack him, even though he was a Boris supporter in this latest campaign. So it's clear that Rishi Sunak was listening. He clearly feels that James Cleverly, a very clever man, is up to the job and will stay in that post at a very, very important time and difficult time, as I say, with the events that are facing Europe with this war in Ukraine, but also, of course, the economic crises now that are affecting many countries around the world, some of it brought on, of course, by Putin's war in Ukraine. So an important announcement there about James Cleverly, our Foreign Secretary, staying in post. Now all eyes will be here, Patrick, on Marsham Street on the appointment of a Home Secretary. Really interesting to see both Grant Shapps and then just straight after him, Suella Braverman heading in there to Downing Street. Could there be a bit of a reshuffle? He's only been in the job 5 days. He's desperate to stay in this big political office of state. But as far as Rishi Sunak is concerned, he may feel that
Just to say, Mark, just to say that we're bringing pictures now for our TV viewers of James Cleverly, rather cheerful-looking James Cleverly, leaving Downing Street there, walking out of number 10 Downing Street through that bank of reporters who are waiting with bated breath for all of the latest announcements. And Mark, just as you were saying, potentially an ongoing battle taking place right inside that famous black door right now between Suella Braverman and Grant Shapps, the Home Secretary position potentially still up for grabs. Carry on, Mark, as you were.
Yes, there's no doubt that the right of the party would absolutely prefer a swift return of Suella Braverman to that job in the Home Office. She's already said, of course, top priority is stopping the abuse by the people, smugglers in sending thousands of people across the English.
Mel Stride walking into Downing Street. Mel Stride just walking into Downing Street the minute through that door. Sorry, Mark, carry on.
Yeah, and she's indicated that she would be willing to consider withdrawal from that controversial European Convention on Human Rights, which has been seen as a block to the Rwanda policy, for instance, to try to send asylum seekers to that country for processing. So that's who many people within the party would certainly like to see here in Marsham Street heading up the Home Office. I think what we can confidently say is that Grant Shapps will not be losing a job, but it is perfectly possible that he could be offered an alternative cabinet post. We don't know. We are speculating at this stage, and of course we've seen before in times of prime ministerial attempts to position those ministerial players, that some cabinet ministers are not willing to accept that and have gone. So let's just wait to see what happens with Suella Braverman and Grant Shapps. It's clear she's going to be offered a job back in cabinet just a week after she left with that row involving Liz Truss. It was, we were told, on the face of it, it was a leak, not a leak, but her inappropriate use of. We're told now that Ben Wallace is going to stay as Defence Secretary. That will be a move welcomed by many people, understandably, because of what is going on in Ukraine. This is a man, a former military man himself, served as an officer in the Guards, very highly regarded in military circles, seen as doing an excellent job at the Ministry of Defence, which is another of these problem departments. But his tenure there has been regarded as a very successful term in office here. Clearly, Rishi Sunak acknowledges that. He wants to keep this minister in place at a very important time in terms of the defence issues that the world faces at the moment. He made a point, of course, Patrick, in his speech at Downing Street before going into Number 10 to say that, you know, a priority was to ensure that Ukraine prevailed in that particular war. So that, the latest breaking news, that Ben Wallace stays as Defence Secretary.
Absolutely. Mark White, stellar stuff. That fantastic. I tell you what, every time I throw over to you, there's more breaking news. I should just stay on you, I think, a bit, really. But I'm going to come away for a second anyway, give you a breather. Mark White there, our Home and Security Editor. We've had Ben Wallace announced. This is just coming to us right now, live on air. So Ben Wallace is the Defence Secretary, staying on as Defence Secretary. I think a sensible choice, really. I know a lot of people actually quite fancied him for the top job. He's refused twice now to really run for it. I think it makes sense, given the ongoing turmoil, doesn't it, to have him remaining there. James Cleverly also remains as Foreign Secretary. Possibly a solid appointment. Let me know what you think about that. Of course, key Brexiteer already in post. Dominic Raab is your Justice Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, a role he's held before. Suella Braverman, this is the one to watch, people. Suella Braverman is in Downing Street, possibly sat in the same waiting room as Grant Shapps. Both of them, you would imagine, vying for the same job. That job is Home Secretary. Olivia Whately joins me now. Good grief, Olivia, our political reporter. It's kicking off.
It is kicking off. Interesting that James Cleverly is back. He's the one Trussite and Johnsonite who's managed to survive what ended up being a bloodbath, even though we were all expecting it to be a pretty quiet sort of reshuffle. As for Suella and Grant Shapps, I mean, the thinking is that it's going to be Suella who gets the Home Office, because don't like to keep banging on about optics, but politicians are very interested in optics. And
Smashes Labour out the park, that.
A straight-out male top four will be unattractive to Rishi Sunak. So it looks like Suella will probably get Home Secretary, which would leave Grant Shapps as business secretary, perhaps, but it's all coming through now. The interesting thing about Ben Wallace's appointment, as you say, very sensible. He's very liked by the party grassroots. He's liked in the country, and obviously with the turmoil in Ukraine, changing defence secretary would be a nightmare. That said, Ben Wallace has said that he will only back a prime minister who has committed to 3% defence spending.
That's interesting.
And it was rumoured that Rishi Sunak was planning to drop the 3% defence spending increase pledge for the sake of trying to cut back on some cash in the fiscal statement on Monday. So it'll be really fascinating to see what he does about that.
Yes.
Is he going to give in to Ben Wallace's
Well, he
demands?
must have done, one would assume.
One would
assume, because if
assume.
that's a red line for Ben Wallace... Now, I don't think it would have made any political sense whatsoever for Rishi Sunak to have actively removed Wallace, so it would clearly have been, you would imagine, down to Ben Wallace to go, right, I want this, are you going to give it to me, Rishi? If the answer to that is no, then I walk, and you've got a massive, massive issue on your hands there. He's well-liked and well-respected both among the Conservative Party base and, indeed, I think, just with the vast majority of the public. So Ben Wallace stays as defence, which would imply that we are now going to remain committed to a 3% spending, defence spending budget. Now, a lot of people in the inbox here, gbviews at gbnews.uk. The Bring Back Braverman campaign is in full swing live here on GB News. She is inside that black door there at Downing Street, inside number 10, alongside Grant Shapps. You are hearing that the noises currently indicate that our Home Secretary is going to be the one that was a Home Secretary until she resigned, wash my mouth out with soap, over a matter of principle when it came to immigration. Suella Braverman cares about immigration, both legal and illegal. She also wants to bring us out of the European Court. She doesn't want any foreign judges getting involved in our laws, and she wants to get those flights to Rwanda taken off. Therese Coffey there walking in. I imagine she'll be out again pretty soon. But back on the Braverman stuff, you know, this is good news for people who care about immigration, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I think that Rishi Sunak was aware that the right of the Conservative Party are the faction, or remember the Conservative Party is split into many, many factions. It's the right who are feeling the most nervous about Rishi Sunak's appointment. And Patrick, you and I have talked over the last few days about whether Rishi Sunak is actually more right-wing than expected. I think if this appointment of Suella Braverman does go ahead, perhaps I shouldn't be talking quite so certainly about it.
No, not at all. It's very much an if, because Grant Shapps is also in there. It's just one to watch, isn't it? Because that's a key one. Michael Gove, here he is. That's taken a long time. Michael Gove there, wandering his way into number 10 Downing Street as we speak. That's going to be an interesting one. Let's talk about that, because we've been speculating, frankly, there about who our next Home Secretary is going to be, if indeed there is a new one. Michael Gove, what would that mean?
Well, Michael Gove, I mean, he's going to be back as something. Yeah. What is he going to be? I mean, levelling up secretary is what he was before. I think that would be quite a sensible move, because I think quite a lot of people are worried that Rishi isn't quite sure what he thinks about lots of domestic issues. It's not completely clear that he's committed to that levelling up agenda that Boris Johnson put forward in 2019. And, of course, Rishi Sunak's now in the position where he's going to have to be making quite a lot of cuts. And there are lots of MPs in red wall seats who are worried that that'll come at the expense of the levelling up agenda. I think if he puts Michael Gove back as levelling up secretary, that would reassure a lot of minds, because obviously Michael Gove, I'm pretty sure, has spent more years in cabinet than any other minister of all time without getting the top
Well,
job.
but hang on a minute. Some would argue two snakes, because we've got Rishi Sunak there, rightly or wrongly, accused of stabbing Boris Johnson in the back. Michael Gove famously stabbing Boris Johnson in the back, possibly on numerous occasions. Michael Gove also very vocal. Anti-trust, wasn't he? Hang on a minute, you wouldn't want to be in that nest, would you?
Well, one could say, I suppose, that Michael Gove has been proved right with his snaking. Of course, with Boris Johnson, he said that Boris Johnson wasn't fit for public office. I mean, lots of people would say he proved that he was fit for public office, and he did lots of brilliant things as Prime Minister. But obviously, the way that his defenestration happened was all about standards in public life, etc. As for Liz Truss, I mean, Gove in the end threw his weight behind Kemi Badenoch, who is another big name on the right of the party, and it felt as though he was choosing between, Liz Truss and Kemi, and he went for Kemi. And I think there are lots of viewers and listeners who would feel that Kemi would actually have been the better choice. So perhaps Michael Gove is showing, pretty savvy political intelligence there.
I think it's absolutely fantastic that one Prime Minister got booted out for having parties in number 10, and then we walk in there, the party maestro himself, Michael Gove. I mean, that guy loves a night out. More than the next man, it's fair to say. Good stuff. You just mentioned Kemi there. I'm just going to do that quickly before we go to a debate, actually. Kemi Badenoch, as far as I'm aware anyway, we're yet to see walk into number 10 Downing Street. Therese Coffey walked in just before Michael Gove. Not convinced that's good news for Therese Coffey, bless her, but there we go. Kemi Badenoch, expected to get something?
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got to give Kemi Badenoch something. She's so popular with the grassroots members, and of course she wrote that fantastic article in the Sunday Times supporting Rishi Sunak. I know that in the last reshuffle, Liz Truss's government, Kemi was agitating for education, which would make perfect sense because a lot of people on the right of the Conservative Party feel as though the culture wars, as it were, are won through schools. And what Kemi's particularly been very vocal on and very good on has been critical race theory and driving critical race theory out of schools. So education is still up for grabs, I'm pretty sure, and Kemi might be a very natural fit there.
I mean, someone's just pointed out here, Barney, thank you very much, gbviews@gbnews.uk. It has popped off in the inboxes. We're on Cabinet Watch here. That camera firmly fixed on number 10's front door. The people coming in, the people going out. Barney's pointed out, Therese Coffey goes in, followed by Michael Gove. Could it indicate that Gove is going to be Health Secretary? Frankly, Barney, and indeed everyone watching right now, it is going to be fascinating to see what happens because, I'm just getting this through to me now. Thank you very much. Nadeem Zahawi is the new Conservative Party chairman. That has been revealed, apparently, there. And that follows, obviously, the outing or resignation of Jake Berry, who did give Rishi Sunak a massive pat on the back just this time yesterday. So what does Nadeem Zahawi's apparent appointment mean as Conservative Party chairman?
Well, I mean, the new Conservative Party chairman faces a pretty big challenge because there are lots of party members who are furious that they didn't get to have a vote on who is Prime Minister this time. There was a very interesting piece by Charles Moore in the Telegraph this morning suggesting that he's obviously a very influential figure among Conservative Party members, suggesting that as
Just to interrupt quickly, sorry, if you're watching your TV screens right now, Steve Barclay, former Brexit Secretary, walking through number 10 Downing Street's front door. I tell you what, whoever's in control of that door better have been doing their bicep presses because it's opening, it's closing. Lots of concerns about whether or not Larry the Cat's going to run out in a second. But Olivia, carry on. Let's do the Steve Barclay stuff. What's going on there? Because he was the former Brexit Secretary. Looks like he could be back in Cabinet.
Yes, he could be back in Cabinet. I mean, he has been... Well, there was an interesting piece in the Times suggesting that he'd actually disappeared over the summer. He wasn't very helpful to Rishi Sunak. But I think that what Sunak is very concerned about, I keep saying all day that the word of the day is party unity. And so if that means Sunak having to let go of some of his most loyal people and promote some of those, people who've been outside the tent, who've been supporters of Liz Truss or Boris Johnson, then that would fit quite well with Steve Barclay. Of course, highly respected as a very competent minister, a good Brexiteer who helped Boris Johnson drive through that Brexit legislation.
Yes, indeed. All right, well, thank you very much, Olivia. You might as well stay where you are, really, because we're going to be coming back to you very, very quickly on Cabinet Watch here on GB News Live. Keep these views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. It's all happening inside Downing Street at the moment. It's a full packed waiting room as we wait for still some key offices of state to be divvied up, including Home Secretary. That was expected maybe to go to Dominic Raab. Instead, he's got justice. He's now our Deputy Prime Minister. Jeremy Hunt remains as Chancellor. James Cleverly remains as Foreign Secretary. Ben Wallace remains at Defence. And Nadeem Zahawi is now the chairman of the Conservative Party, which means, of course, Mel Stride is in as well, by the way. There is the potential now for Suella Braverman to be brought back as Home Secretary. What would that mean for Grant Shapps? We wait with bated breath, ladies and gentlemen. But Rishi Sunak has, of course, become the United Kingdom's first British Indian Prime Minister. His appointment has been praised across the world, with the actual Indian PM sending special Diwali wishes to the living bridge of UK Indians, there we are, and the Times of India proclaiming him as a proud Hindu. The UK having its first non-white Prime Minister is being hailed as progress. But I want to ask if race really matters compared with the Prime Minister's actual ability to govern. I know a lot of you will be throwing things at your TV screens now, going, why bring race into it? Hey, don't blame me, blame the Labour Party. They're always the first people on the bandwagon, it would appear, when it comes to saying, well, we need more people of colour. Oh, no, that's not the right kind of ethnic minority. Well, there we go. Joining me now is founder and trustee at the Patchwork Foundation, Haris Bakari, OBE, and culture change expert, Kul Mahi. Thank you, both of you, very, very much. First and foremost, I'll go to you, Haris. How significant is it that we now have our first non-white Prime Minister?
Thanks for Patrick to be back on the show. Look, it's 2022. We've had the first Muslim mayor of London. We've had another female Prime Minister. We've had the first black Chancellor. So it shouldn't matter, and we shouldn't really care about it. So what really matters is that this is a person who's risen to the top of his profession, his field, on merit, on his hard work, and it just happens to be the first non-white Prime Minister. I think that's what should be celebrated, his talent, rather than where he's from.
Yeah, and I think that's a really, really crucial point, actually, because, Kul, I'll bring you in now, a culture change expert. I suspect that the culture is going to have to change from some people on the Labour Party benches, so focused on identity politics and pigeonholing people. I think the vast majority of people couldn't give less of a toss that Rishi Sunak happens to be non-white, frankly.
Well, I think one thing that we need to accept, it's an iconic moment in British history. We do have somebody who represents the huge diversity of this amazing country. And I think that shone through the passing of the Queen, where we saw people from every sort of religious and ethnic divide from across the country coming together. For me, when we talk about diversity, more beyond the issue of representation, this physical representation of diversity, has to come cognitive diversity. What I mean by that is everybody will be judged on how they behave as a leader. So just because you've got a brown, black, female or gay, straight person at the very top, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to impact on the culture of the organisation, the party. The test of that will be how Rishi Sunak, and it's a huge task that he's got in front of him. He's got a fractured party. He's got to build trust with the public. He's got to deal with the economic crisis that we've got. He's got so many challenges ahead of him, and I think that everybody will judge him on how well he does in terms of dealing with those issues. True leadership.
Yeah. Oh, OK, fine. We'll go back to Haris quickly. Just frozen there, Kul. Haris, I'll bring you back in now. Is it a little bit disheartening to hear people, even people who are ethnic minorities themselves, saying, oh, you know, well, he's not really an ethnic minority, presumably, as far as I can tell, that's just because he's rich, which now apparently is also a terrible thing. Do you find that disheartening? That seems to be the argument now. Whenever a Tory, who happens to be an ethnic minority, comes to a position of power, well, they're not the right kind of ethnic minority.
Well, I think we should celebrate somebody who has achieved great success in terms of his academic background, in terms of what he's achieved in his professional career as well. And look, in politics, we need the best people to serve us in the country. I still find it quite surprising that the Prime Minister is not the highest paid salary in the country. We want the best people to serve at the highest levels. And if that means Rishi Sunak in reality has taken a pay cut to be the Prime Minister of this country, that means he's serving for the best interests of this country. So I think it should be celebrated. He's a successful individual. It should be celebrated that he's got there on merit and his skills and his ability. And look, yes, history proved him to be who he is after the next couple of years to see, can he really deliver in terms of what the people really care about? And our country's proven over many years. You can argue Boris Johnson, David Cameron, Tony Blair, were they the average person that used to live in the UK? No, but the public basically resonated towards them. If that was to do with their values, if that was to do with their policies, and that's what Rishi Sunak's going to be judged on as well.
Kul, I'll bring you back in now. Do you think that the Tories are showing that you don't need positive discrimination or affirmative action or whatever it's called these days in order to actually succeed? If you're good enough, you'll get that.
Yeah, I think there's an element of that. But I think what we need to understand also is so many organisations are chasing diversity targets. And for me, it is not enough simply to chase diversity targets just so you can have this visible representations. True diversity comes from a change of culture where people feel valued, appreciated, seen and heard, where they can voice an alternative opinion and know that they're not going to get shot down. That's true culture. That's inclusive culture. And there's a lot of buzz phrases going around in the whole diversity arena. And for me, it's very, very simplistic. We need to focus in on cultures. We need to create cultures where people feel included. And great on Rishi Sunak. I think it's fantastic that we've seen somebody of a different persuasion, a different colour there at the very, very top. I think Harry's absolutely right in terms of he didn't need to do this. You know, he's a rich guy, but he's done it, I think, because he feels he wants to achieve something.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And can I just ask as well, Harris, the optics, right, of Rishi Sunak, their number 10, leader of the country, Prime Minister, potentially, we are speculating here, potentially Suella Braverman being brought back in as Home Secretary as well. Two great officers of state, two people who backed Brexit, two people who've certainly used quite strong rhetoric with things going on in the Channel or illegal immigration, bringing down the numbers of legal immigration. That must be a bit of a fascinating dichotomy to a lot of people, to kind of get their heads around the fact that two people who come from an immigrant background might actually have, quotes-unquote, conservative attitudes towards immigration as well. Do you think people find that hard to understand, Harris?
I don't think they do at all. As I said, look, how many people really out there are looking at the skin colour or the faith that somebody actually believes in when they actually elect that individual? People want to resonate in terms of their values and their policies. But one thing that I think is really important to share with you is I had lots of messages from young Hindus up and down the country today, is that picture of Rishi Sunak shaking Her Majesty the King's hand. And if you notice, he had a red kind of bangle on his, or a kind of a bracelet on his arm. And that shows the devotion he has to his faith. One thing that I find very unique about Rishi Sunak is that during a whole leadership campaign, he never once said, elect me to be leader, to be the first non-white leader, first non-white prime minister of this country. He's very proud in his faith, but he shows it in a way that it doesn't have to be kind of opposing or conflicting in terms of other people's views and values as well.
Yeah, indeed. Cole, and just talk to me a bit now, because when I go to, I went to school in Manchester, in Rusholme, an area affectionately known as the Curry Mile there. Diversity around that part of the world, absolutely massive. Birmingham, where I was for Tory party conference, again, very visibly diverse. London, where I am now, again, we all know, probably the most diverse city in the world, if not one of, anyway. And now, people in positions of power, whether it's the Mayor of London, I'll leave the politics out of it, but the Mayor of London is there. Of course, we've got now a Prime Minister as well. We had a Home Secretary, possibly a Home Secretary. We had a black Chancellor for a while, for a few weeks, I suppose. I mean, now, people who are not white in this country can now look and surely know that every possible door is open to them.
I think this, if there's any one point, it's this, that if there's any case of representation, it's the fact that anybody from any persuasion, from any localized community, underrepresented community, can be represented at the very, very top. I think when we saw the Queen passing and we saw millions of people coming together, we saw that there's a huge diversity across the United Kingdom. And I think the fact that we've now seen people in senior positions is just a reflection of that diversity.
Is a great thing, absolutely. OK, look, both of you, thank you very much. I'm just going to leave that there because the number 10 door is opening and Kemi Badenoch is going into it. Quite on point, actually, given the nature of what we've just been discussing. But that was, of course, founder and trustee at the Patchwork Foundation, Harris Bakari, OBE, and culture change expert, Cole Mahay. Really enjoyed that, chaps. Thank you very much. I'll be back on again very, very soon. Just, a couple of big stuff to bring you there. Nadeem Zahawi has left now, number 10 Downing Street. He is now the chairman of the Conservative Party. Kemi Badenoch, just seen then Olivia Rutley, our political reporter, walking in.
Yeah, I mean, Kemi Badenoch has got to get some sort of good job because not only is she extremely popular with party members and tipped as the next big thing in the Conservative Party, she also backed Rishi Sunak at that very pivotal stage over the weekend when he hadn't yet got enough nominations. And a very powerful piece that she wrote in the Sunday Times, which I expect convinced a lot of Tory MPs to throw their weight behind him too. So I think she's going to get something big. Will it be education? I know that's what she wanted under Liz Truss and failed to get. So maybe that's an in for her. As for Suella Braverman, it's quite interesting how long it's taking. As we're assuming, she's wanted as Home Secretary. Why is it taking quite so long?
And Grant Shapps has been in there ages as well.
Yeah, there's a question. I mean, Harry Cole is suggesting that it's possible that it's hit some sort of ethics stalling block.
Oh, I see.
Because she was kicked out for a security issue just a week ago, and it's possible that something like that's going on, because it is a bit strange that we haven't heard anything yet. But I mean, her and or Kemi are definitely going to get top jobs, because it's notable at the moment just how male Rishi Sunak's government is, and modern prime ministers don't like to look.
Well, I'm not being funny, but on the note that we were just talking about there about whether or not anyone gives two hoots about what skin colour anyone is, should anyone give two hoots about how many women there are?
Well, perhaps not, and I think there'll be, plenty of people in the country who don't think it matters at all. But we do know that in the sort of modern parliament, people do care about these things, and they will be critical of it. And I think that's one battle which Rishi Sunak probably doesn't want to pick on his first day. He doesn't want all the headlines, all the pictures to be men in grey suits, basically.
No, absolutely. Just to run you through where we are so far, because it's been a fast-moving picture. So Jeremy Hunt remains as our Chancellor. What do you make of that? We have also seen James Cleverly remains as Foreign Secretary. Dominic Raab is now Justice and also Deputy Prime Minister. Grant Shapps, as it currently stands, is still our Home Secretary. Rumblings that may change and they might bring back Braverman. Jake Berry, who was the former chairman of the Conservative Party, has been replaced by Nadhim Zahawi, who has just left Downing Street. Kemi Badenoch has just walked in to Downing Street. As Olivia Whately there, our political reporter, was saying, apparently she would like education, but a big one. And one to watch, ladies and gentlemen. I can't believe it took this long, but it's happening right now, because Michael Gove is in number 10. Oh, good grief. That could be an interesting one. The important thing there is going to be what brief to give him. Michael Gove, seen by many, actually, as, yes, OK, potentially a backstabber, potentially a man always permanently on manoeuvres, but a very intelligent man nonetheless, a chap who knows his way around government, and I think, not bizarrely, just generally, quite a safe, stable pair of hands. What does this mean now for Rishi Sunak? We're learning a lot about Rishi Sunak as he assembles his cabinet. We're bringing all of this live to you here on Cabinet Watch. Oh, also, by the way, just worth reminding you, before we go to the headlines, that Ben Wallace is still our Secretary of State for Defence. We're going to go to headlines shortly, don't worry. Ben Wallace has remained as our Secretary of State for Defence. So a bit of stability there. Simon Hart is your new Chief Whip. And Darren McCaffrey is in Downing Street for us, I believe. Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, will be joining us shortly. He'll be there shortly. Darren McCaffrey has been keeping his eye on that famous number 10 door for us. He will be there shortly for us to discuss this. But Olivia Whately joins me again now. Olivia Whately, our political reporter. The Michael Gove situation, just talk to me about that, because Gove is proving an interesting choice when it comes to our viewers and our listeners in our inbox. gbviews@gbnews.uk. What do you think about Gove?
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one, that, because just a few weeks ago, with great fanfare, Michael Gove hung up his ministerial boots, and now it looks like he's going to be pushing them back on again. I mean, he's clearly a very, very experienced minister, and I think actually that's a point that we haven't yet talked about very much. Liz Truss was criticised for only having her close friends around her, both in Parliament, in government, and in Number 10. She promoted a lot of very close friends and allies at the expense, perhaps, of experience. And what's quite interesting about Rishi Sunak's government so far is that everyone, I think, apart from Gillian
Olivia,
Keegan...
sorry to interrupt you. We are now just going to Downing Street. Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, joins us. Darren, take it away. What's the latest?
Yeah, we just saw pictures there, didn't we, of Chris Heaton-Harris arriving inside Number 10. He's the current Northern Ireland Secretary. A big Boris supporter. He was working very closely with Boris Johnson over the weekend to try and see if you could get to that 100 names when it came to a nomination. It looks like he's going to remain, though, in post as Northern Ireland Secretary. Really important job, given the fact that the province is facing a very, very difficult situation, not least of all the possibility of an election in December. That is legally what's meant to happen on Friday, unless things are sorted out. We believe that Stormont is going to reconvene tomorrow. So a bit of consistency and stability there, it seems, for Northern Ireland. I think the most interesting thing is that we've just simply got this massive backlog of ministers inside Number 10. Now, everyone from Grant Shapps to Suella Braverman to Kemi Badenoch, right through to others that we've seen go in the last couple of minutes, Michelle Donlan, for example, and others, and we're still awaiting those job announcements. Therese Coffey is still in there. the woman who is at the moment Health Secretary. I think also what's interesting, Patrick, I speculated earlier on that Dominic Raab might be moving to the Home Office. That clearly didn't happen. He's Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary, again a very close ally of Mr Sunak. But what is happening with the job of Home Secretary? One would have thought it would have been announced by now, and yet we await. Has Grant Shapps still got it, or is Suella Braverman on the precipice of potentially getting that job back, having resigned from it, essentially less than a week ago? We really don't know. But at the moment, we watch and wait, and here comes someone else emerging from the door. Oh, no, maybe not. Sorry, I'm looking at the screen and also behind me at the same time, and you were replaying clips. It's not necessarily live. We're waiting to see who emerges from that door. But at the moment, it really is that big job of Home Secretary that everyone is waiting to find out whether and who will get it. We should note that Ben Wallace has also been reappointed as Defence Secretary. James Cleverly remains as Foreign Secretary. It does seem, when we've seen Steve Barclay go in, many of these faces will be familiar. This is not an appointment of lots and lots of new faces. It is essentially, Patrick, what I think Olivia talked about earlier on, which is experience, talent, big beasts within the party. Michael Gove is inside there, almost certainly going to get in charge of the Department of Levelling Up. This is an attempt by Rishi Sunak to try and, yes, unite the party, but bring in experienced hands at the same time.
Good stuff, Darren. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor on Downing Street for us, watching people coming in and out. Now, I want to go to you, the people. Big day this. It's Cabinet Watch. It's live here on GB News. So far, Raab, Justice, Deputy Prime Minister. Ben Wallace is Defence. Braverman, Suella Braverman is in there, OK? So she was our former Home Secretary, resigned. Shock horror, on a principle of actually caring about immigration, both legal and illegal. Might be a nice touch if she got that job back. What do you reckon there? Grant Shapps has been sitting in there a while. Bit of a ducker and a diver, to be fair, is old Grant, so we don't know what he's deciding to do with himself. Kemi Badenoch is in there as well. She's going to be given something. What will that be? Michael Gove is in there. He's going to be given something. What will that be? James Cleverly remains as our Foreign Secretary. Braverman is Home Secretary. There we go. Ladies and gentlemen, Suella Braverman has now been announced as your new Home Secretary. What do you make of that, people? There we are. So Suella Braverman now retakes her post as Home Secretary, of course, resigning formally on a matter of principle when it came to immigration. And she is desperate to get the boats either turned back or certainly when people land here on planes and over to Rwanda, as it would appear is Rishi Sunak himself, and also, crucially, getting us out of those European courts. Mark White joins us now. Mark White, our Home Security Editor. Mark White, Braverman's back.
Well, what a turn up for the books. Everybody was suggesting earlier today that Grant Shapps may well stay in this job for continuity reasons, for stability reasons. He desperately wanted to stay on here at the Home Office, but just 5 days into his tenure here, he's gone. Don't know what department he's going to next, if any. Of course, he might not accept what Rishi Sunak has in line for him next, but he's leaving the Home Office. The new Home Secretary is the Home Secretary we had just over 5 days ago, Suella Braverman, who resigned. Now, you remember in her resignation letter, she was going because of a breach of the ministerial code. She had shared a classified document with someone who was not cleared to read that document. It was on the government's immigration plans, but really that was just the public excuse. There was this fundamental policy difference that Suella Braverman was having with Liz Truss at the time about the total migration numbers, not illegal migration, but overall migration, so legal migration as well. Suella Braverman wanted the cap on that number not to be exceeded, but Liz Truss's government saw an increase in migration to the UK as a way of stimulating the economies. And we're told that Grant Shapps is going to be Secretary of State for Business. So he has accepted the new post offered to him by Rishi Sunak. He is moving here from Marsham Street, just round the corner, to the business department. And as I say, Suella Braverman coming back in here. Now, what will be really interesting to find out is what is happening with regard to the government's policy on does it boost migration, net migration to the UK in an effort to stimulate the economy and growth. Has Suella Braverman changed her mind on an issue she was fundamentally opposed to a week ago, or has she been given certain reassurances by Rishi Sunak that that number will not be exceeded, or if it is exceeded, it won't be a long-term stated goal of this government. That is all to come out in the wash in the hours and days ahead. But Suella Braverman was delighted, of course, to take over here at Marsham Street. She really wants to get to grips with the small boat crisis in particular, Patrick. She has said she is willing to countenance a withdrawal from that controversial European Convention of Human Rights, which many have seen as a block to the Rwanda policy of sending those asylum seekers to Rwanda for processing over there, mired, of course, in legal challenges in our courts at the moment. So a key priority now for Suella Braverman, as she takes over back here at Marsham Street, is to get that legal challenge won as far as the government is concerned, and to get the first of these asylum seekers on aircraft across to Kigali, the capital of Rwanda.
Well, well, well. Mark White, our Home and Security editor. Busy day. What a time to be alive, ladies and gentlemen. It's days like this that the news is for, and we are here for you. GB News Live, very much live. If you're just joining us, Braverman is back. Let me just read a quick excerpt from her resignation letter, which was, good grief, when was it? A few days ago, pretty much. She's saying there that she doesn't believe, of course, this government's commitment to honouring the manifesto commitments, such as reducing overall migration numbers and stopping illegal migration, particularly the dangerous small boats crossing. She has previously been very vocal about the influence of foreign judges in our courts, about the ECHR. Our very own Nigel Farage was sat next to me when she resigned, and he came in and he said, that's it for the Tories. They no longer care about migration, legal or illegal. And for what it's worth as well, where's Rishi Sunak on all of this? Well, Rishi Sunak, again, is saying he's desperate to get those planes taken off to Rwanda. He's desperate to put a cap on the number of refugees/asylum seekers that we take in this country, and to hold the French's feet to the fire when it comes to stopping those small boats coming across the channel. Is this now starting to have the whiff of a proper Conservative party and a proper Conservative cabinet, and indeed people in key offices of state who might pull us out of the ECHR and get those planes to Rwanda taken off? Get your emails coming in, ladies and gents. gbviews@gbnews.uk. And we've got someone going in there. I'll bring you that in a second. Olivia Utley joins me right now.
I think it's Alistair Jack.
Alistair Jack. OK, we'll come to that shortly. Olivia Utley, I just want to stay on this for the moment anyway. Good grief, a sensational return to the Home Office for Suella Braverman.
Yeah, and I think that'll reassure the right of the Conservative Party, who were a little bit worried by the removal of Liz Truss and the coronation of Rishi Sunak, that the Rwanda policy might get ditched. But the return of Suella Braverman suggests that Rishi Sunak is quite serious about, as you say, getting a cap on immigration and stopping those small boats crossing the channel. Obviously, it does give an attack line to Labour because Suella Braverman was ostensibly kicked out of the cabinet 6 days ago because she was a security threat, because she accidentally sent an email.
Well, I mean, she's no more of a security threat than some of the issues that have been going on in the channel, but I know that's not the point.
No, I mean, you know, there is a good argument that that resignation, that reason was sort of trumped up as a way to get rid of Suella Braverman because she and Liz Truss or she and Jeremy Hunt disagreed about immigration. But the fact remains that the actual reason given for her being removed from government was that she was a security threat. So Labour will certainly use that. That said, one thing which we haven't mentioned is Rishi Sunak was keen on stability, and actually the three great offices of state are now held by the same people who held them last Wednesday.
Yeah, you know what, actually, this is starting to look, I think, like increasingly good politics from Rishi Sunak, because Suella Braverman gave arguably the best speech at Conservative Party conference when she was Home Secretary, and she laid out what she cares about and what she thinks about, like being really tough on law and order. David Davies not to be confused, of course, with David Davis, has now entered number 10. We'll bring you the latest on that as when we get it. But just to return to what is, frankly, the big news in this reshuffle at the minute, which is the return of Suella Braverman. Braverman is back. She is now our Home Secretary yet again. As I was saying, I think shrewd politics from Rishi Sunak, because we all already know where she stands on various things, because she dished it all out in that speech at Conservative Party conference. And by the way, it wasn't just to do with what's going on in the Channel. It wasn't just to do with getting the numbers of legal immigration under control. She also said she wanted to get rid of things like a woke tendency in our police, be strong on law and order, the old life means life stuff as well. So, frankly, Suella Braverman, I think, will be a very, very good move when it comes to uniting the Conservative Party, to you getting Rishi Sunak in touch with the base of that Tory party, that same base of Tory members who were not given the opportunity to actually vote for him this time round. And also, frankly, maybe deal with what's been going on in the Channel. The cause that does mean, and something that's been overshadowed in all of this, is that Grant Shapps, who was our Home Secretary for about 2.5 minutes, is now Business Secretary. Quite possibly another shrewd move, actually, because Grant Shapps is big when it comes to business, so might well work out. We're still awaiting, by the way, what's going on with Michael Gove. Michael Gove is in Downing Street. We're seeing a couple of other people walking in as well. I'll be bringing you all of that, of course, as we get the latest. But really, really interesting in my inbox right now. There has been a shift. Is Rishi forming a, quote, dream team? This comes from Carol Ann, who will do exactly what the electorate voted for in 2019. It appears so. But I don't think he's got much choice if he wants to regain trust and votes for the Conservative Party. Carol Ann, thank you very much for that email. gbviews@gbnews.uk. And there's a lot of this coming in right now. Sunak's reappointment of Suella Braverman might just be the masterstroke needed to give the Tories their smallest chance of re-election. That is from an unnamed viewer. And a key point as well about getting us out of the ECHR. Kathy's been on. Kathy, excellent news. She's allowed to carry out her job. Suella Braverman proving to be a phenomenally popular appointment so far. And Scott perhaps sums up the feeling of traditional Conservative voters. Scott tells me, I'm feeling politically rejuvenated. There were mostly people picked by Boris along the way. Here we go. I'm batting for the Conservatives again. That's Scott's view. Interesting, isn't it? I'll tell you what, Olivia, yesterday my inbox was full of people negative, people cutting up their Tory membership cards. What a difference a day makes.
Absolutely. I think that Rishi Sunak has done a good job here, so it seems, of reassuring the right of the party, who are feeling pretty twitchy, that he is serious about the concerns that they're worried about, including illegal immigration and legal immigration, of course.
Absolutely, Olivia. Thank you very much. Olivia Whately there, our political reporter, doing stellar work, bringing you all the breaking. Yes, it is our Cabinet Watch special, and what a special it's been so far. But now the Liberal Democrat leader, Sir Ed Davey, has accused Rishi Sunak of failing to, quote, trust voters by not calling an immediate general election. In his first speech as Prime Minister earlier, Rishi Sunak emphasised that the mandate gained in 2019 election belongs to all of those in the party who stood on the Conservative manifesto. But many members of the public are dismayed by the way that Rishi Sunak has found his way into office, i.e. the fact that nobody, even Tory party members, got the chance to vote for him. That led to calls for a general election. By the way, those calls might have changed now people take one look at his new cabinet. But should Sunak take on Starmer at the ballot box, or does the country need a PM to just get on with the job? Joining me now is former newspaper editor Neil Wallace, who believes there should not be a general election, and political consultant Emma Burnell, who is keen to have one. Thank you very much. Emma, I'll start with you. I would not for a single second begin to presuppose your political allegiances. Not that I really need to. I've met you a few times before.
I used to be contributing editor of Labour List. I think the cat's out the bag.
Yeah, it is. It was out a while ago. I was just doing you a couple of favours there. But no, Emma, you were keen for a general election when we booked you on to have this debate. Are you as keen to have one now we've started to see this cabinet wander through the door?
God, yeah. Yeah. Parade of has-beens. Absolutely. Bring it on.
Yeah, go on, just elaborate on that, really, because clearly there will be a bit of a bounce when it comes to this, certainly with Tory party members who were a bit homeless before for a day or two.
Yes, I'm absolutely sure you're right that Tory party members, all 160-odd thousand of them, might also go back to voting Tory. That's not going to be quite enough to get Rishi over the line. Okay. I mean, the truth is, we don't constitutionally have to have a general election. That's not how our constitution's written, and I get that. But I do think that the next 18 months, which are going to be very, very difficult, the idea that you can both deliver on the 2019 general election manifesto and do the kind of incredibly tough spending cuts that they are talking about, those two things don't balance. And so they need a mandate for one or the other. And they don't have a mandate for the latter.
All right, what's really interesting, I'll tell you what, I'll just bring you in now. Neil Wallace, former newspaper editor, is if... just getting it through my ear now, Grant Shapps is leaving. Grant Shapps has just left Downing Street. He is, of course, our business secretary. Back to our discussion now. Neil Wallace, former newspaper editor. If Rishi Sunak... Oh, yeah, that's another one. I can't quite see who he is from where I'm sitting, I'm afraid. I'll bring you that in a bit. Neil Wallace, back to you for the third and final time. I'm not getting cut off again, all right? I'm not. Neil Wallace. So, if Rishi does actually pull this off, OK, and he's got people like Robert Justice, Brexiteer, Ben Wallace, seen as strong and stable in terms of Defence Secretary, Braverman as Home Secretary, she unequivocally cares about immigration, both legal and illegal. Kemi Badenoch's in there now. Now, Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor calms the market. Has he actually, James Cleverly, Foreign Secretary, has he actually created a cabinet that does align closely with that 2019 manifesto, therefore giving him a mandate, therefore giving him public popularity, and therefore no need for a general election?
Yes. Got it in one, in truth. What he's done is prove the basis of the British Constitution, which is that you elect a party. We do not have a presidential system. Plainly, whoever leads a political party makes a huge difference. But we do not go into the polling booth and vote and tick a box that says either Conservative Party or whoever the leader of that party is. We vote for our local MPs, and that's the way it always has been, and that's the way it should be. And of course, this is a complete cant from the Labour Party, who they know fine well. There was a chap, I don't know whether you remember him, called Gordon Brown, who became Prime Minister exactly the same way. Before that, I seem to remember many years ago, there was a bloke called Harold Wilson got Prime Ministership in exactly the same way. What Rishi Sunak has done here is completely legitimate, it's completely wise, and I think, as you're pointing out, he is lining up a whole batch of people who totally justify that manifesto.
Well, I must say, Emma, I'll be honest about this with the nation. I sat here this time yesterday and I was bang in favour of a general election. I thought we're looking at something now that's a bit undemocratic. I thought, and I still do think there is, by the way, a fantastic cracking case for a general election. Don't get me wrong. But now we've actually seen a cabinet being put together, part of me's like, well, let them have a go first, and then we'll see what we're voting for. Because at the moment, we don't know. It's a cabinet of unknowns.
Well, it's not a cabinet of unknowns. That's your point, isn't it? You know them all. We know how much they've already messed it up. I mean, Neil's right. There's no constitutional reason to have one, but politically, if I were a Tory, I would not call in favour Gordon Brown as the reason to call off an election that people want, because we all know what happened to his poll ratings as soon as the election that didn't happen. That's when he tanked. And he was looking. The reason he called off that election, the reason he never went for it, is he thought he might lose a few marginals. That's not how it ended up.
Well, Emma's raised a really good point there. Emma's raised a really good point there, because actually it is a cabinet of all right, not necessarily in their jobs apart from Solly Braverman, but it is a cabinet of knowns. So actually, I suppose we could have a general election. Maybe we do know what we're voting for.
Well, I think there's a bizarre rewriting of history about what happened to Gordon Brown there. Gordon Brown didn't go for an election because he had an unpublished opinion poll, and I know because I commissioned it, that told him he was going to lose his entire cabinet and he was going to completely tank. And he changed his mind on that vote, let me tell you, in one morning. It was a Saturday morning as well, because I was there. Anyway, go back to the basic point. What we have here is politics. What we have is the fact that no party, if the Labour Party or the Lib Dems were in this position, there is no way they would go for a general election after the events of the last few weeks and in this febrile atmosphere. You would have a bigger argument, I think, in 6 months. What we're going to see here is the market's going to calm and the whole situation is going to cool right down.
OK, Neil Wallace, thank you very much, former newspaper editor, thinking that there should not be a general election. Emma Burnell, very keen for a general election. Good stuff. A conversation that's going to rumble on, frankly. It's going to rumble on. No doubt we'll have to do this again. Thank you very much, both of you. Big day here. Just want to fill you in on some of the basics that have taken place so far on our Cabinet Watch special. And I'll tell you what a Cabinet Watch it's been. Braverman is back, our new Home Secretary. Grant Shapps, he's off to business. We've got Jacob Rees-Mogg, nearly said he's out. We've got Dominic Raab as Justice and Deputy Prime Minister. Ben Wallace remaining as Defence. We've got Kemi Badenoch, who's one to watch because she's in Downing Street as we speak. James Cleverly remains as Foreign Secretary. Michael Gove is also there with him. But importantly, someone that we haven't spoken about in all the excitement of the last hour or so has been Jeremy Hunt, who stays on as Chancellor. And we're going to go live now. Perfect timing, at least we're going to go live in just a second, to Liam Halligan, who is our economics and business editor, who's joining me in the studio right now. He's hardly had time to catch his breath. Liam, look, I know initially when we first planned this show, we were going to be talking about loads about the cost of living. I'm sure we'll come on to that a little bit. But the most relevant question at the moment is Jeremy Hunt remaining on as Chancellor, right? A sound move from Sunak, do you think?
I think it would have been ridiculous not to keep him on as Chancellor. We've already had 4 Chancellors in as many months. People have been producing sort of calendars and wall charts. The name of the game at the moment is stability. Boring as a positive word. Jeremy Hunt is never going to punch the lights out. He's not particularly effervescent politician, I think, by his own description, but he is seen as competent. He's got a very strong track record in business. He's Health Secretary for 6 years. He knows how to run a big department. He knows how to handle money. And by the looks of it so far, he seems to be in lockstep with Rishi Sunak. So it would have been change for change's sake to not keep him there at a time when financial markets, Patrick, do seem to be settling down a little.
And this is why I suspect now that we're seeing, this could be famous words, someone clips this and plays me back in 2 weeks' time when Downing Street's on fire again, but potentially quite clever politics from Rishi Sunak, because if he has put, quote-unquote, a proper Conservative in charge as Home Sec, he's got a few Brexiteers in there as well in key offices of state, he's kept a bit of stability, like in the shapes of Ben Wallace and James Cleverly, and a Chancellor that doesn't spook the markets. The Tories are back on top, are they?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, I've just been hitting the phones. I've been talking to a couple of Tory activists I know, people out in the shires. And of course, there's a lot of anger that they didn't have their say, that this is a coronation. Of course, among a lot of them, they're still saying, why did MPs get rid of Boris? We wanted Boris. He wasn't never given a chance. But I do think now there's a sense that it's better to get behind Rishi Sunak. As I said, borrowing costs for the government are falling. They're down from 4.2% at the weekend to now like 3.6%. 3.7, a huge adjustment downward. Now lower, Patrick, that 10-year gilt yield than it was before the mini-budget, which is interesting. Yeah. And, of course, it sounds arcane, but that gilt yield, the cost of government borrowing, that ripples out across the economy. Your mortgage, personal loan rates, they're always going to be higher than that government cost of borrowing. So the lower that government cost of borrowing, the lower should be when you take out new loans, remortgage, all the rest of it, your borrowing costs as well.
Fantastic. Grant Shapps now. You are, of course, our economics and business editor, Liam. Sometimes I feel as though the business element of that gets a bit overshadowed by what's been going on in the economy. But Grant Shapps, well, you've got someone else to get your teeth stuck into now. What do you make of him as our new business sec?
Well, he's kind of a safe pair of hands, Grant Shapps, isn't he? He has got a bit of a patchy record in business. There's been some controversy over his business dealings in the past. He's not here to defend himself, and it's all on the record. But there have been, allegations that he's used different names in business and so on. But he is a very effective communicator. You have to hand it to him. He's good on a sticky wicket. He's good in interviews. He is somebody who clearly understands business and can read a balance sheet, if you like. He's famous for reading spreadsheets, of course, because he's very good at tracking which MPs are voting for whom. But I think they're a pretty humdrum appointment. It will be a tough time for business. He will need a business secretary, Rishi Sunak, who can talk to business at a time when corporation tax is going up and so on, and is seen to be on business's side as the economy struggles. And I guess he's hoping that Grant Shapps can fulfil that role.
Yeah, indeed. And just sticking with you for a second, Liam, because if I'm looking at this now and I'm looking at Rishi Sunak in number 10, obviously Prime Minister, and Jeremy Hunt in number 11, one would imagine that really Rishi Sunak could well be both Prime Minister and Chancellor at the same time.
Well, it's not often that Chancellors actually become Prime Ministers, or at least not for very long. John Major became Prime Minister, he hadn't been Chancellor for very long, and then Gordon Brown, having been Chancellor for a long time, didn't spend very much time as Prime Minister. But clearly Rishi Sunak has been Chancellor very recently for a fair amount of time, and importantly, during COVID. The reality is, Patrick, I think when future historians look back on this, a lot of what Rishi Sunak's got to do is clear up his own mess, in a sense. Now, he would say, his supporters would say it wasn't his fault that he spent very heavily during COVID on furlough and business support loans and so on. But I think he could have spent less.
Just quickly, Liam, sorry, Penny Mordaunt is leaving Downing Street. So Penny Mordaunt has just left and has been reappointed as leader of the House of Commons. So Penny Mordaunt, that's an interesting one, actually, because one did suspect that Penny Mordaunt had perhaps agreed something in advance with Rishi Sunak in order to step aside.
An eye-catching sideways move.
Yeah.
I've expected her to sort of move up.
Yeah, this is exactly the
Leader
point.
of the House is a bit of a consolation prize anyway. It's what Geoffrey Howe, did. It's the kind of thing that you give to somebody whose political stock is on its way down rather than on its way up.
Well, that's
with all
fascinating.
respect to her.
I just can't help but wonder whether or not she knew she'd agreed to that role before she was actually given it. I'm going to go to Mark White now. Mark, Liam, thank you very much, by the way. Mark White, our Home and Security editor. You're a busy man, Mark. What's the latest?
Well, Patrick, there will be, of course, whoops of delight amongst the Tory party faithful tonight that the Bring Back Braverman campaign has succeeded. Suella Braverman, 5 days after she left office as Home Secretary, resigning, is now back here in Marsham Street within minutes of Rishi Sunak reappointing her to the position of Home Secretary. She arrived here at the front of the building. She posed just for a few seconds for a few photographs and then straight back to work. She has a huge in tray. This is one of the big governmental departments, always a tricky one, always throwing up multiple crises. And it's not just the small boats issue, as huge as that obviously is. There's an issue around violent crime and the levels of violent crime which are far too high. There's a crisis of confidence in policing of late, especially within the country's biggest police force, the Metropolitan Police Force here in London. And there's those pesky eco-warriors who are causing such turmoil and disruption on the streets of London in particular on a daily basis now. The government is, as we speak, trying to push through additional legislation to deal with these protesters, to ensure that there will be stiffer sentences for those involved in these kind of disruptive tactics to try to dissuade them from doing that. A big, busy entry for Suella Braverman, but a great deal of delight, no doubt, within the Conservative Party that this woman is back in office here in Marsham Street and will deal with, of course, the small boats crisis as our #1 priority.
Mark, I'll just stay with you. I've had an email in here, and this is not the only email of this kind that I've been getting. Genris has been in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Genris tells me, this morning I was going to resign from the Conservative Party. At 5 p.m, I've changed my mind. Sunak has won me over and doing a great job choosing his cabinet. And massive parts of that cabinet, Mark, are Suella Braverman's reappointment. By far, as you can imagine, the most important thing for our viewers, just in the inbox that I'm getting at the minute and the feedback on Twitter. Also, Dominic Raab at Justice, something else that's in your brief. I believe it was you who we were live with when James Cleverly was announced as the Foreign Secretary as well. So and Ben Wallace, indeed, so who's deemed to be a pretty steady pair of hands when it comes to defence. But just in terms of Raab, he's Brexit. You've got Braverman, Brexit as well. You've got Sunak, Brexit. And what are some of the key issues facing this country at the minute? Law and order, immigration, the economy. And actually, it might be quite refreshing, Mark, to see people who voted for Brexit to have Brexiteers in those three positions of power.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like this is very intelligent, thoughtful appointments being made here by the new Prime Minister. What it isn't is the chumocracy that we saw under Liz Truss. He is clearly confident enough to appoint people that didn't outwardly support him during this particular leadership election campaign or the one before. He's getting what he believes to be the most talented people into these positions within his cabinet, knowing that they face a very, very difficult job in the weeks and months ahead. But that is the cabinet that he feels is best placed to try to get the economy and many other aspects of this country back on an even keel again. We're seeing that today in these appointments. And as you say, you know, Suella Braverman, just one of the appointments that will restore some faith within the party. People very concerned that they've been left out of this particular process to appoint Rishi Sunak. The decision as well to keep the Foreign Secretary in place at a time of tumult around the world, not least, of course, that war raging in Ukraine. And, of course, the Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, seen to have done such an excellent job in his time as Defence Secretary, a former army officer himself, well regarded amongst the military, and now staying in that position, of course, and Jeremy Hunt, as we were mentioning before, a very important position of Chancellor. He has decided that for reasons of stability, for reasons of ensuring that there's confidence within the markets as well, Jeremy Hunt is staying in place.
Mark White, thank you very much. Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, will not be the last time we speak to you, no doubt, before this show is out. Just want to give you a little tease, people. I've been reliably informed in my ear that we have a whole host of MPs just waiting in the wings who are going to be talking to us in a matter of moments, and that is absolutely vital that we do that, because we need to get this reaction from the MPs to see what they make of these new cabinet appointments. No doubt a few of them themselves might have been a bit disappointed, although when you see the kind of quotes-unquote political heavyweights who've made their way into Downing Street so far, perhaps there is good reason that they're talking to me and not talking to Rishi Sunak or indeed the Whip's office. I'll be bringing you those very, very shortly. Fascinating stuff. Just want to bring you up to speed. We've got Raab at Justice and Deputy Prime Minister, Wallace as Defence, Braverman is Home Secretary. Yes, you heard. We've got Grant Shapps as Business, Nadhim Zahawi is Chairman of the Tory party, Jeremy Hunt remains on as your Chancellor. Rumblings. These are just whispers, though, that Kemi Badenoch may well be in line for education. I'll have to bring you the latest on all of that. James Cleverly remains, of course, as Foreign Secretary. Oliver Dowden is Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. And Michael Gove is in Downing Street, along with Steve Barclay, a former Brexit minister. That will be fascinating to see what happens there. What do you make of all of this? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Olivia Rutley, I'll just bring you in very shortly. Olivia Rutley is our political reporter. I tell you what, an interesting one there was possibly a bit of a snub for Penny Mordaunt. I'm just going to stick with the overall feedback I'm getting actually at the moment. Fast-moving pitch, this, ladies and gentlemen, bear with me. But the overall picture I'm getting in my inbox is that the appointment of Suella Braverman has made Rishi Sunak now arguably the most electable Prime Minister we've had in weeks.
Yeah, I think lots of people will be very relieved to see Suella Braverman back in her old job. I don't mean to pour cold water on anything, but I think we can't underestimate the amount that Labour is going to be using this as a big, big attack line, because she was kicked out of her job because of a security misdemeanour. And yes, perhaps that was hammed up a little bit, but if you read Tim Shipman's expose in the Sunday Times, it could be argued to be quite serious.
Okay.
And Rishi Sunak has talked a lot about professionalism and integrity at the heart of his cabinet. It's a little bit tricky to see how he's going to square that circle. But that said, you know, placating the right of the party and showing that he's very serious about these concerns which are very, very important to his voters, such as illegal immigration, was completely necessary.
Absolutely, Olivia, great stuff. Thank you very much. Stay right where you are. Olivia Rutley, there, our political reporter. Liam Halligan's still in the studio. I'll throw over to you in a bit, Liam, and I'm getting all these emails in right now. gbviews at gbnews.uk. A lot of this. Hi, Patrick, this is from Cliff. Some really astute selection of cabinet ministers here. Raab, Braverman, Wallace, etc. have secured my vote. All of this coming your way very shortly. And ladies and gentlemen, when I return after the headlines with the wonderful Polly Middlehurst, I will be bringing you some much-needed reaction from MPs. Let's find out what they make of the latest cabinet appointments. Yes, I'll see you in a tick. Let's go to the news, and I'll see you when I come back. We'll have some MPs.
Patrick, thank you. Good evening to you. Yes, the appointments coming thick and fast in Downing Street today. The Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, forming his new government with his cabinet slowly starting to take shape. Let's take a look then, if we can, at the detail so far. Downing Street has confirmed, first of all, that Jeremy Hunt will stay on as Chancellor of the Exchequer, but it's still not clear whether or not he'll publish his fiscal plan on Monday. Let's look at other key appointments for you as well. Dominic Raab was also confirmed this afternoon to return as Deputy Prime Minister. He has the additional portfolio as Justice Secretary as well. Then we went on to James Cleverly. He has Foreign Secretary as his portfolio. Suella Braverman, perhaps the most controversial appointment this afternoon by the new Prime Minister, is back as Home Secretary less than a week after she resigned over an alleged breach of government ministerial code. Also on the list today, Grant Shapps is Business Secretary, and Penny Mordaunt, plenty of silence about whether or not she would be appointed in Rishi Sunak's cabinet, and one of the last to be appointed in the last 10 minutes or so. Penny Mordaunt remaining as leader of the House of Commons. Well, earlier, speaking for the first time as Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak vowed to fix what he called the mistakes of Liz Truss's leadership, and he pledged to place economic stability at the heart of his government. But he warned the country should brace itself for difficult decisions ahead.
I understand how difficult this moment is. After the billions of pounds it cost us to combat COVID, after all the dislocation that caused, in the midst of a terrible war that must be seen successfully to its conclusions, I fully appreciate how hard things are.
The words of Rishi Sunak outside Number 10. But let's not forget the outgoing Prime Minister, Liz Truss, as she bid farewell to Number 10, saying brighter days lie ahead. And she urged the Prime Minister to be bold in her final speech from Downing Street, praising her government, adding they had acted urgently and decisively as she spoke of cutting taxes. Well, in other news today, the Tory government has denied a British human rights activist was arrested and then released by police in Doha. That comes after Peter Tatchell staged the first public LGBT+ protest in any Gulf state ahead of next month's World Cup. A video appeared to show him being approached by a police officer outside the National Museum in Doha. That's it from me for now. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. The Finance Report is next. So a quick snapshot of how the markets have reacted to today's news from Downing Street. Well, the pound buying you $1.1470 and €1.1514. The price of gold is £1,444.09 an ounce, and the FTSE closed at 7,013 points.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
Welcome back to GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. Now, what a show this has been so far, people. What a time to be alive. It's Cabinet Watch, and it's been a mega edition of it, people, because so far, Rob has gone to Justice Suella Braverman. That's the big one, really, isn't it? Back in as Home Sec. That has done wonders for a lot of Tory party voters who have been getting in touch with me right now in my inbox. That means that Shapps moves to business. Jeremy Hunt is at Chancellor. I'll be talking shortly with our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, on that one, because he has calmed the markets, but not a particularly popular chap, it would appear. Kemi Badenoch still in Downing Street. We are yet to get confirmation as to what she is doing. Say that to me again in my ear. Gillian Keegan is Education Secretary. Now, that's just come through, OK? Blink and you'll miss it here, people. James Cleverly remains as Foreign Secretary. Michael Gove, it remains to be seen as to exactly what he's doing. He's also in Downing Street. Olivia Utley, now our political correspondent, joins me now. So, a bit of a switch up here. So, the most popular appointment so far, undeniably, has been Suella Braverman. And all of the emails that I'm getting in front of me right now is the fact that Sunak apparently has got it right when it comes to this cabinet.
Yeah, well, I think he's done quite a clever job. What he wanted to do at the beginning of the day was sort of balance loyalty with unity, experience with youth, and that's basically what he's done, balancing right and left as well. And those are all the things that he's managed to do. We were worried, I think lots of people worried about the sort of chumocracy under Truss, and he's definitely reversed that. He's got a government of all talents. James Cleverly, for instance, was no backer of Rishi Sunak at all. Backed Johnson, backed Truss, never backed Rishi until the very last minute. So I think he's done a good job with that. And I think with the balancing right and left, I mean, to have Jeremy Hunt, who is, I mean, in lots of ways, he's actually quite right-wing. He's quite a big tax cutter by personality. But, you know, he's seen as a left-winger in the Conservative Party. To have both him and Suella Braverman in the cabinet suggests he has managed to do a sort of government of all the talents, and it should keep people happy, at least for the time being.
At least for the foreseeable future, yes, indeed. Seen as a very, very shrewd move, not least because Rishi Sunak, it would appear, is quite aligned when it comes to Suella Braverman. So, in terms of getting us out of the ECHR, getting those foreign judges out of our rules and our regs, basically, determined to either, well, not turn the boats back, but when those boats land, get some of those people on a plane to Rwanda. Both Suella Braverman and Rishi Sunak committed to that Rwanda deal. Rishi Sunak also wants to put a cap on the number of refugees and asylum seekers that this country will accept. And he was quite vocal, actually, about holding the French government's feet to the fire when it comes to stopping some of those boats getting out there to begin with. So, actually, a united front, which is not what we saw under Liz Truss and Suella Braverman. Suella Braverman famously tendering, well, a resignation or agreeing to leave, however you want to phrase it these days. And yes, it might have been bracketed as some kind of security breach, someone CC'd onto an email, but actually the reality of it was, as Suella made perfectly clear, she did not believe that Conservative government of the day cared about legal or illegal immigration. Nigel Farage, our very own, was sat next to me at the time. He said that's it for the Conservative Party, and potentially even rumblings that there could be a new political party. Has the right of the Tory party now been appeased? We've also got Ben Wallace at Defence, seen as a shrewd move. But the only negative rumblings that I'm getting through in my inbox from you at home so far, or if you're listening in your car or online or whatever you're doing, gbviews@gbnews.uk, is for Jeremy Hunt at Chancellor. Now, Liam Halligan joins me right now, our economics and business editor. Just to explain perhaps why some people are anti-Hunt, but why maybe he's a good appointment.
Well, he's a bit of a mixed bag, as Olivia alluded to. On the one hand, when he stood to be Tory leader, he wanted to cut corporation tax from 19%, where it currently is, to 15%, down near to where it is in the Republic of Ireland. Now he's going to oversee a move from 19% to 25%. So in that sense, he's a bit of a mixed bag. But I think what's interesting is you've now got Suella Braverman at home as Home Secretary. She was one of what we call the Spartans, right? These are the 25 MPs that kept voting against anything in the House of Commons when it came to Brexit. Yeah. And you could argue it's only because of those 25 people. Priti Patel was another one. Steve Baker was famously one. Marc Francois, that Brexit actually, in the end, happened. So it's interesting, and Jeremy Hunt, on the other hand, was as near to sort of Remain. I mean, he voted Remain, and a lot of Conservative backbenchers would say that he was actually trying to reverse the referendum during those Brexit wars. So a really mixed, broad range of people. But Jeremy Hunt, he's certainly going down with the financial markets. I just wanted to mark, Patrick,
please do,
that the pound is now up at 115. That's still low by historic standards, but we haven't seen 115 since mid-September, since way before that mini budget. So a lot of people will be saying Jeremy Hunt there, he is certainly calming the markets, and government borrowing costs are coming down as well. So if that is why he is in the cabinet, strong and stable, to coin a phrase, stability, if that's why Rishi Sunak wants him there, as well as the political balance that Olivia referred to, then it's working.
Liam Halligan, thank you very much. Olivia, thank you very much. Talking of strong and stable, this chap's had to be, because he's been standing around absolutely ages. It is Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, outside an increasingly dark Downing Street, but a light for the Conservative Party, by far and away. Suella Braverman, the most popular choice in this particular cabinet at the moment. Has Sunak saved himself?
Well, interesting, isn't it? I mean, it obviously depends what perspective you're from. Clearly, she's got a very tough line when it comes to immigration, doesn't she, Patrick? She did make that, I would say, possibly rather odd comment that she dreams about putting asylum seekers on planes to go to Rwanda. But you're right, she is determined to sort out the small boats crisis in the English Channel. And frankly, there does need to be a tough approach on all of that. Here she is, just arriving at the Home Office. In the last couple of minutes or so, having travelled here from Downing Street. Though it must be said, this time last week, Suella Braverman was the Home Secretary. She is still the Home Secretary. There was a little interlude of Grant Shapps. I think there will be questions, though, for Rishi Sunak. Why do I ask that? Because this is a Prime Minister who's gone into Downing Street today talking about integrity, talking about professionalism, and we all know that Suella Braverman had to resign last week because she admitted that she had made mistakes when it came to sending emails with documents that should not have been sent outside of the Home Office. She admitted that. She resigned over it. Many will question whether she has got the integrity and indeed the professionalism to be Home Secretary. So, as I say, for some, of course, they will be delighted that she's back at the Home Office. For others, though, this will lead to questions about the political strength, if you like, of Rishi Sunak. Now, clearly, Suella Braverman backed Rishi Sunak during that leadership contest of the weekend. It was clear she was going to have to be rewarded. She took quite a few right-wing MPs with her, and she has today been rewarded. We also wait.
Darren, sorry to interrupt, Darren. Sorry, I've just had this through my ear whilst you were talking there. Is that Mel Stride is now Department of Work and Pension. Sorry to interrupt you, Darren, but I thought that was relevant given we are on Cabinet Watch.
Yeah, no, indeed it is, and I was just about to mention his name alongside that of Michael Gove. He was talked about, Mel Stride. He is and has been chair of the Treasury Select Committee. He's been much talked about potentially as a chancellor, but clearly with Jeremy Hunt in that position, he's been given the big task of DWP. Now that is going to be absolutely fascinating, not least of all given the fact that unemployment benefits and benefits, whether they're going to be linked to inflation or earnings, is going to be a big discussion. And there are real concerns about the cost of living crisis this coming winter. I think Michael Gove is looking increasingly likely, if not certain, to end up in levelling up. Again, he's seen as a big beast of the Conservative Party, a big brain who's ultimately got on top of his brief, though he was, of course, sacked by Boris Johnson in the final hours of his premiership. The one really other notable story since I last spoke to you, Patrick, was Penny Mordaunt stayed on as leader of the House of Commons. Now, her supporters have made it clear today that she wanted to be Foreign Secretary. She is not Foreign Secretary. That is James Cleverly. She's been reappointed as leader of the House of Commons. Frankly, it is not a big government job for someone who finished effectively second in the non-competition yesterday, and I think her supporters will be a little frustrated that she has not had a bigger role in this government, and that will be one to watch, I suspect, in the days and
Darren,
weeks
can I just interject?
But so far, it does seem that this reshuffle is going reshuffle is not really a reshuffle, of government. A Rishi shuffle is going relatively smoothly, and at least I think they'll be pretty happy with that.
Very quickly, Darren, very quickly, any rumblings about Michael Gove? Is Michael Gove tipped to get any particular role? Because he's inside at the minute, isn't he?
Yeah, I think he will get levelling up and housing, so his previous role. And the reason I say that, there you go, that's Mel Stride leaving as the Secretary of State for the Department for Work and Pensions. The reason I say that is because it is the role he had. Even those that dislike him within the Conservative Party and outside recognise that he was doing a pretty good job at getting on top of understanding the complexities of housing and trying to sort out that market. And also, I think by putting someone like Michael Gove back in charge of levelling up, it will be a sign that the government is committed to levelling up. And that's important, given the fact that Rishi Sunak today repeatedly said that effectively he was going to try and bring about the implementation of the 2019 manifesto, arguing that it was that manifesto and the Conservative Party that won that election, not just Boris Johnson, levelling up clearly at the heart of that. And that's why I think Michael Gove will end up back in that department.
Darren McCaffrey, stellar stuff from Downing Street there, our political editor. Joining me now is Haz Ahmed, political campaign strategist, who, get this, worked on Rishi Sunak's first Tory leadership campaign. I won't dwell on that one too much, Haz, but all the fact that he seems to be doing rather well now. However, people are actually saying that he seems to have got this right. You know Rishi Sunak as a strategist, as a man, as a political chess grandmaster. Was this a shock to you that he's managed to, in the views of a lot of our viewers, knock this cabinet out of the park?
Thank you, Patrick. Look, Rishi is somebody who understands how to have the best people around him. Even in his own campaign, he, worked relentlessly hard to get the message out. So I do believe that the appointments he's making is really it's not just about, it is about the country, but it's also about the party as well. So we want to make sure that we are a united party that is taking on the challenges that we face at hand. So absolutely, I believe in Rishi, and I certainly do believe that he's making all the right calls at the moment.
Does he really, really, truly believe in the Rwanda deal, in strong borders, in cutting down on illegal immigration, or has he just put Suella Braverman in post there to appease the right of the Tory party?
If you look at Rishi's 10-point plan in the campaign that he pointed out initially, he did talk about cutting the net migration, and also just talked about strong borders. So that is, of course, quite an important topic for Rishi, and I think having Suella in there, and not just some of the stuff that is quite important for us as a country, but I think having strong borders is quite a priority for Rishi, of course, up there with the economy and others at the moment. So I do believe, Rishi is making right choices at the moment, and Suella certainly would be the one who's actually looking at his vision and her own vision put together.
Well, we kind of know what her vision is because she rather helpfully told it to us when she was Home Secretary last time, a few weeks ago, at Conservative Party conference. And that went down rather well. So if she can crack on with that, and she does have a Prime Minister who genuinely believes in getting control of immigration, both legal and illegal, then that could be a good move. Does Rishi Sunak want to get us out the ECHR? Because we keep hearing that he does, but until he does, we can't crack on with the Rwanda plan.
I'm afraid I'm not able to comment on that at the moment. I think that is for this government to decide.
You're a strategist.
Well, I was initially on his campaign, but I was not on the talking about ECHR and this, because what was important for us to really unite the party and actually getting the message out that we want to have a strong grip of our economy and getting control of our inflation right now, which is incredibly high, though, and I'm sure Rishi has a lot on his in tray at the moment, but certainly I'm pretty sure those decisions as they come, they will be made by the Prime Minister.
If you were a strategist now, would you be telling him absolutely under no circumstances go to a general election for another couple of years?
Well, we have to look at where we are today, Patrick, and I think where we are, we're not in a position for any general election. Right now, it's about really rebuilding that trust within the country through the Tory party right now. We'll have to look at where we are in the polls. I mean, Labour is about 30 points ahead, even though, we've gained 2 points today with Rishi, and it is only looking hopeful onwards and upwards. But the general election right now would probably not be ideal for the Conservative Party because they have a lot to rebuild, and Rishi is really determined to make sure that he rebuilds that. So I do hope, general election doesn't come quite imminent.
Hass, I want you to be really brutally honest with me here, even if it might be a little bit difficult for you personally. You were, of course, his political campaign strategist when he launched his first Tory leadership campaign. What did he get wrong then, or perhaps you get wrong then? There's no shame in admitting that. And what is going to be different now? Because it needs to be different now, doesn't it?
Patrick, let me be quite clear. I worked on political campaigns, but I was by means his political campaign strategist. He had a really brilliant team around him, and I'm sure they're still around him today. But we didn't get anything wrong. As a matter of fact, as you probably saw, as Rishi said, mistakes had been made, and it is now time to correct those mistakes. But those were mistakes by the previous administration. And of course, what Rishi predicted in his earlier campaign came out to be true, especially about the markets and everything that he talked about in his campaign, what would it do to mortgage rates. So Rishi is now determined to make sure that we rectify that and really earn that trust from the public.
Hass, thank you very much. Hass Ahmed, a political campaign strategist, cheers, Hass, who worked on Rishi Sunak's first Tory leadership campaign. Another bit of breaking news, ladies and gentlemen, as we bring Cabinet Watch to, well, a little bit of a close. Therese Coffey, someone's just asked. Caroline's been in touch. Any news on Therese Coffey? I'll tell you, Caroline, yes. She is now our Environment Secretary. There we go. She's gone from Health and Deputy Prime Minister to Environment. Olivia Whately joins me right now, political reporter. What's the crack?
Well, it's an interesting move, that. I mean, it's good for the sake of party unity, probably, that he's kept Therese Coffey in the cabinet. Therese Coffey was obviously a very close friend of Liz Truss's, and it was rumoured she would be out. But obviously, Rishi Sunak decided to conduct government in a very different way to Liz Truss. He's not punishing people for supporting his rival at all. Moving her over to Environment, that's interesting, because she'd already sort of got her feet under the table at Health. She already had her ABCD plan. So, a little bit gratuitous, perhaps, moving her across.
Well, it opens it up, doesn't it? It opens Health up.
Opens Health up. I'm hearing it might be Steve Barclay at Health.
That's interesting.
The job that he left last September.
Steve Barclay, just for a bit of reference for people, is currently in Downing Street, former Brexit minister. This is fascinating, actually, because if you really break this down, you've got Raab, Brexit at Justice, Braverman, Brexit at the Home Office, Cleverly, Brexit at the Foreign Office, potentially, if these rumours are true anyway, Steve Barclay, Brexit as Health. Michael Gove is in number 10 at the moment. I mean, realistically, it's quite a Brexity cabinet.
It is quite a Brexity cabinet, apart from, of course, Penny Mordaunt, that prominent Brexiteer who has been sidelined. But what I find odd about Penny Mordaunt is how badly she played the hand that she had on Monday. It was a very strong hand. She was, garnering the support of lots and lots of MPs. And if she'd just decided to fold a little bit earlier, she perhaps could have got some sort of promise out of Rishi Sunak, or at least the implication that she might get something. But instead, she let it go up to the wire, failed to get the support needed. And now, understandably, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak doesn't really feel he owes her anything.
Olivia Whately, thank you very much. Political reporter there, Olivia Whately. That's basically it from me. We're going to go to Jubes & Co next. I believe Michelle is here in the studio with me right now. Yes, OK. Michelle, what have you got coming up?
Hello, Patrick. I've enjoyed Cabinet Watch. I've been there with my popcorn. What an afternoon it has been, and we will be continuing that conversation on Jubes & Co. I want to focus on the 3 Ps, the people. Who's in and out of that cabinet? Is it right? Is it wrong? Who was missing? Have our viewers had their fantasy cabinet expectations, desires met or not? What about all those people that yesterday were saying they're going to leave the party as members? Are they going to come back now with that shock return of Suella Braverman, so I want to get into the people. Also the policies, Patrick. What should Rishi and this new government be focusing on over the next, let's just say, 30 days? And the public reaction, I want to get into that. Did you hear I predict a riot taking place on the speakers when Rishi Sunak was doing his, I thought, quite good speech? Do we predict a riot? What is the public reaction going to be to all of this?
Good stuff, Michelle. Don't take your eyes off it because it is going to continue rumbling on. Michelle Jubilee there with Jubes & Co, who will be coming your way in just a few minutes' time. We've been doing Cabinet Watch for the last 3 hours here. I just want to leave you with the current state of play before I go to the weather. Rob is Justice and Deputy Prime Minister. Ben Wallace stays on as Defence. Suella Braverman, you heard right, is back as Home Secretary. Jeremy Hunt is your Chancellor. Nadeem Zahawi is Chairman of the Tory Party. Grant Shapps is Business. Therese Coffey is Health. James Cleverly is Foreign Sec. We are also hearing, of course, Oliver Dowden, and he changed his gender then. Oliver Dowden is Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. We'll wait with bated breath what's going to happen. Oh, sorry, Therese Coffey's Environment, not Health. Anyway, there you go. It's been a long day. See you in a bit.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. The next few days it will be quite windy, particularly in the west. Further outbreaks of rain at times, but it will be exceptionally mild for the time of year. Looking at the pressure pattern, low pressure still dominates, drawing in warm air from the near continent, but also some stronger winds, outbreaks of rain, with weather fronts never too far away. So the rest of Tuesday, outbreaks of rain continue to push their way northwards across the UK. Some heavy bursts possible overnight. It pushes eastwards as well, introducing rain to many parts. However, there will be clearer skies, particularly across the east, but even here we'll see some rain by the end of the night. And temperatures, well, where they should be during the day at this time of the year, 14 to 15 Celsius, well above average. So a cloudy start to Wednesday morning. Showery outbreaks of rain continue to push their way north and eastwards. It will be windy. We will see some gales still around the coasts across the west, but it will brighten up as we move into the afternoon. Plenty of sunny spells developing, staying gusty, but despite that, temperatures will lift to 18, 19, 20 Celsius. The average here should be around about 14 or 15 in the south, in the north around about 11. Through the evening time,